Choi Hyuk stood firmly on the ground in the middle of the park. He effectively knocked out his opponent to the ground, with his fist still clenched. Regardless of age, size, or number of opponents, he inherently knew how to fight and could win against them all. Worried about Hyuk getting hurt while fighting older people, Hyuk's mother asked about the scars on his face. One day, Hyuk was dragged away by 5 teenagers who were trying to steal his money. Despite Hyuk's warning to let him go, the teenagers refused, and an evil grin spread across their faces, revealing malicious intent. One of them rushed towards Hyuk to make him fight with him. Hyuk stopped holding back. Hyuk's mother heard about it and rushed to see him, but she was shocked. His mother broke down after hearing news about his opponents as one went blind and the other died on the spot from a concussion. Hyuk was taken to the police station for murder, but wasn't subjected to criminal prosecution since he's a minor. The broken mother pleaded with her son, not letting him go away. The mother cried and asked Hyuk not to hit anyone again, ever. Realizing he's a weapon, his mother asked him to bear embarrassment, as it was a punishment for killing a person. Years passed, Hyuk grew up, and he entered his classroom. He confronts Bae Han-sung, Kon Min-ho, and Lee Min-ki. Min-ki charges in and punches Hyuk in the gut, asking him to speak up. While Min-ki locked Hyuk's head and was asking about his breakfast, Hyuk tried to laugh it off and replied that he couldn't have breakfast. Lee pointed his finger towards Min-ji, who was eating, and asked Hyuk if he knew what he should do now. Being embarrassed, Jong Min-ji, president and first-place holder in the whole school, swiftly turned her head away. Kan Min-ho took control of Hyuk and threatened him, asking if Hyuk had completed his math homework. Hyuk reached for his bag and said to Min-ho that he had written the solution process correctly this time. Min-ho took over the note and smacked Hyuk as a token of appreciation, suggesting he would have stayed the year if he had written the wrong solution process again. Han-sung was hungry and threatened Hyuk to give him his wallet. Nervously, Hyuk took his wallet out of his bag and went along with them. During class time, Hyuk was nodding his head over and over. Min-ji realized he wouldn't be intimidated if he just stopped shaking his head, making him look nervous. She was really annoyed by this gesture. But Hyuk was just analyzing how he's getting rusty about his fighting form, and how difficult it is for him to pretend that he doesn't know how to fight. An image of himself was created in his mind, and he wondered if he could win a fight with Min-ki effectively and instinctively. But he became aware of what he was thinking. Hyuk started to nod again, as if he was trying to get rid of those killer thoughts and atone for his sins. He was clear that he would not fight again, and started to wonder why everyone looked so weak. Suddenly, something caught Hyuk's attention behind him. A blue orb spawned out of the air and violently started to spin across the class, pushing back everyone and everything. The orb quickly became a bubble, and everyone was perplexed about the situation. Quickly, all the students checked their phones to communicate, but the screen turned off for everyone. Min-ki tried opening the door, but it didn't move an inch. Someone yelled, "Min-ki, move away from the door." Min-ho charged towards the door and kicked it hard. He injured his leg as Hyuk is visibly confused as to why Min-ho is kicking a sliding door. The class teacher tried to calm everyone down and instructed the students to sit on the floor. Amidst the chaos, some students noticed that something's written over the front of the ring. Confused about its sudden appearance, everyone started to focus on what was written. The rules for the Ring of Rebirth were disclosed. Han-sung was excited about it and was also thinking about whether it's real, while others are worried about deleting people. The teacher was still trying to control the room by instructing the students not to move from their seats until they got a clear picture. The panic started to grow as people started to worry about how long they had to stay in the room and what if the rules were true. Hyuk was comparatively calm and was ready to accept the situation that they would starve and die. Suddenly, Hyuk's focus diverted as the teacher yelled for Min-ki to get down from the ring. While the teacher was insisting on him to get down, Min-ki refused as he felt trapped and bored, while Han-seong was smirking from behind. Suddenly, Min-ki was able to realize multiple stat abilities. With a confident smirk on his face, he ducked. Min-ki launched himself into the air, realizing his physical abilities have improved while his classmates are shocked to see him. His classmates calculated that his jump was nearly over a meter or so and were shocked by his superhuman jump. Realizing the power of karma, Min-ki thought that the rules for the Ring of Rebirth might be real. Min-ki, with an evil grin on his face, points his finger and calls Gil-soo Yang to the ring. Gil-soo froze for a moment and others were shocked. Suddenly, something pushed Gil-soo from behind. Everyone, and Gil-soo himself, was confused about who pushed him. An unknown force started to pull Gil-soo towards the ring. Suddenly, Min-ji rushed towards the ring with concern. She held Gil-soo from behind and asked everyone to come help him. Everyone, including Hyuk, rushed in. They all held a part of Gil-soo's body to prevent him from being dragged. But despite their efforts, the force was too heavy for them, and it pulled Gil-soo out of everyone's grip. Suddenly, a bubble appeared and prevented other classmates from entering near the ring. Since most of them were trying to hold Gil-soo back, the barrier held them outside. Being envious about the fact that Min-ji hugged Gil-soo, Min-ki was standing menacingly in front of Gil-soo. Min-ki started to question Min-ji's friendship because of his envy, while Hyuk and Min-ji are both confused about what's happening. Min-ki was surprised and slightly startled by the fact that the rules are actually real. Gil-soo started to panic and shiver out of fear. Even though Min-ki had an advantage, fear was instilled in him. He understood the reality of this situation, but the beast that was lurking inside him fueled his malice and hunger for strength. Min-ki quickly caught Gil-soo with a sleeper hold from back. Gil-soo started to suffocate and slowly lose his grip while Min-ki strangled harder. The teacher yelled at him while his classmates were just witnessing a gruesome act. Gil-soo almost passed out and lost his grip on Min-ki's arm. The other classmates were horrified by Min-ki's heartless beating. Gil-soo fell on his knees and slowly started to lose consciousness. Suddenly, despite losing consciousness, Gil-soo gripped Min-ki's forearm. Slowly, Gil-soo planted his feet to the ground and stood up, even though he was held by a sleeper hold. He firmly squeezed Min-ki's forearm and slowly tried to remove the submission move. Gil-soo violently ripped Min-ki's shirt off while escaping the sleeper hold, leaving his forearm scarred with his grip. As Gil-soo escaped the sleeper hold, he moved forward while Min-ki fell back due to Gil-soo's strength. Gil-soo thought about his actions, how he escaped his situation with a piece of Min-ki's shirt in his hand. While Min-ki was shocked to see Gil-soo's strength as it almost broke his arms, Gil-soo clenched his fist with determination, realizing he could win this fight. Enraged by Min-ki's actions, Gil-soo charged towards him to punch him. The punch lands right on Min-ki's face. With such a heavy force, Gil-soo was able to push Min-ki away. He slowly released his fists as he positioned Min-ki to the center of the ring. Gil-soo took a glance over his hand, understanding his strength. With sheer confidence, he clenched his fists again harder. He charged towards Hin-ki again to throw a punch, while Hyuk was standing beside the ring, analyzing the fight. Hyuk knew it was pointless for Gil-soo to charge towards Min-ki. Hyuk analyzed the situation and understood that Gil-soo should adopt a defensive approach to dominate Min-ki in this fight. Hyuk saw that Gil-soo was stronger, but Min-ki was faster than Gil-soo, and Min-ki landed a devastating right hook. Gil-soo was still on his feet and charged towards him again. But because of Min-li's longer arms and greater reach, Gil-soo was at a disadvantage, and Min-ki landed another jab. Min-ki saw a quick opening and went for a left hook, but since his reach was short, he easily evaded it. Min-ki quickly countered the left hook with a right. While the fight was still going on, Hyuk thought of the reality of the situation before, where he was a weak boy, and there was Min-ki, who pretended to be strong. He understood that if this fight were telecast on TV, people would ignore it and laugh it off as a kid's fight. But the reality was the cruelty itself. Min-ki landed a hard jab to Gil-soo's face. The glass panels over the window started to vibrate due to the force exerted by the jab. But it did not change their fighting skills. It was the ring that powered Gil-soo to endure and strike heavy like a bull, and Min-ki to be quick and agile like a deer. Within an instant, Min-ki rushed in with a heavy punch point-blank at Gil-soo's face. The hook landed right on the face of Gil-soo. But to think of it, karma powered him up, else he would have ended up in the hospital with broken bones. Gil-soo tanked the hook. Sparked by rage, Gil-soo quickly locked in. He jumped towards Min-ki to swing a strong uppercut, but Min-ki narrowly dodged it. The classmates were just sad and shocked to see the phenomenal athletic abilities of these two individuals. Min-ki was surprised to see Gil-soo's endurance and stamina levels. Motivated by this, Gil-soo was determined to land one more hit. He went to his fighting stance, with his fists as strong as a rock, and was ready to charge towards Min-ki. Gil-soo slowly started to lose his stamina, while his nose and mouth started to bleed heavily. He charged towards Min-ki regardless of his stamina exhaustion, while Min-ki was aware of his jab. Min-ki slipped out and countered Gil-soo with another jab. With immense power, the jab was planted right on Gil-soo's face. Min-ki was trying to follow up the jab while Gil-soo almost lost his balance. He quickly closed the distance and covered up with an uppercut near Gil-soo's face. This devastating blow knocked Gil-soo's teeth out and made him lose consciousness. The broken teeth fell all over the ground around the ring. Consumed by evil intentions, Min-ki quickly took control over Gil-soo and held his head, and was ready to throw powerful punches. Min-ki pounded Gil-soo's face, and this caused the classmates to panic and get scared of the scene. He started to pound harder and harder on his face. Exhausted by this, Gil-soo tried to plead with Min-ki, but Min-ki did not stop punching him. Blood started to splatter all over the class while his classmates tried not to look at this scary and gruesome act. And for the finisher, he unleashed a lot of powerful strikes to his face. After this continuous beating up, Min-ki stopped and looked at Gil-soo. Gil-soo's head was almost squished, and blood was splattered everywhere. His classmates were just shocked to see the horrors Min-ki did to Gil-soo. While Gil-soo's hand slowly started to fade away into ashes, Min-ki, confused about what's happening to Gil-soo, his whole body started to fade away into dust. While he was thinking, some dust particles entered his nose. Gil-soo completely faded away into dust particles. While the other classmates were panicking, Hayek was shocked to see Gil-soo fading away into dust. He saw some spilled blood and witnessed the last breath of a person. This reminded him of his past incident when he was in the 6th grade. Hyuk realized how easily he killed that high school student. But it was his mother who really mourned the death of the student. It was his first and last time he committed a murder, but this time it was committed by others. However, Min-ki's attitude was different from his attitude when he committed it. Min-ki suddenly felt an overflowing energy surging through his body. Min-ki realized he had become far stronger than before. Understanding that he got this power surge after killing Gil-soo, Min-ki was consumed by greed for power and was determined to kill everyone to become stronger. Min-ki turned around creepily and was looking for the next opponent. He set his eyes towards a weaker classmate. He chose Yoon Ki-rim as his next opponent. Scared by Min-ki's ruthlessness, Ki-rim started to panic out of fear, thinking the same would happen to her. But not only Ki-rim, but also most of the classmates got scared after witnessing Min-ki's fight. They all realized the Ring of Rebirth actually made Lee Min-ki be reborn as a demon without mercy. Just like Gil-soo, Ki-rim was dragged to the ring by an unknown force while the other classmates were just confused. Not wanting to die, Ki-rim screamed for help while she was dragged by her leg by this unknown force. Min-ji quickly grabbed her hand, tried to prevent her from entering the ring. The other classmates were just standing still as they thought she would still suffer the same fate as Gil-soo, even if they helped. Min-ji helped Ki-rim to get up while Ki-rim was still traumatized. Without hesitation, Min-ji yelled that she would like to fight Min-ki, and this shocked Ki-rim, but Min-ji just took advantage of Rule 2 of the Ring of Rebirth. Ki-rim broke down into tears. As Min-ji entered the ring, Ki-rim cried hard, thinking even she would suffer the same fate as Gil-soo. Min-ki was surprised to see Min-ji in the ring, and the other classmates were just speechless about her actions, and Min-ji started to stretch her arms. Min-ki smiled, asking Min-ji if she was really going to fight him. Min-ji stayed silent, implying a yes with that silence. He quickly locked in and accepted her request. While Min-ji was warming up, Min-ki offered another chance. Min-ji was confident and smirked. She finished her stretches and came face to face with Min-ki. With a soft smile, she cussed at Min-ki and was ready to fight him. Min-ki chuckles it off, thinking Min-ji was crazy. With his fists open and a creepy grin on his face, he rushed in towards Min-ji. He quickly grabbed Min-ji by her shoulders and pushed her to the ground. Just like how he took control of Gil-soo, Min-ki took control of Min-ji within a few seconds. Min-ki came closer towards her with malicious intent. Consumed by lust, he tried to take Min-ji's clothes off first before even attacking her. Feeling powerless, Min-ji felt awkward in her body and felt uncomfortable. Min-ki was distracted by this, almost enjoying the moment while he was trying to rip her dress off. When he tried to open the shirt by force, a button flew across due to the immense force he exerted. The spinning button hit Min-ki's face, catching his attention over the situation. The button stopped rotating after it hit Min-ki's face. And in that moment, he knew something was off. Min-ki realized he was stabbed by a tool to his head by Min-ji. Before he could even react, while he was distracted due to his lust rather than his hunger for power, Min-ji quickly took advantage of this situation and stabbed Min-ki. The Min-ki started to lose his consciousness before the button even fell to the ground. Min-ji pulled the sharp tool out of his head, splattering Min-ki's blood. She pushed Min-ki to the ground while he went unconscious, as he was bleeding heavily. Before even the battle could begin, Min-ki lost to his lust and fell to the ground before the button could fall. The button fell to the ground after Min-ki, but covered with his own blood. With a deep sigh, Min-ji was trying to calm herself while she firmly gripped the tool. Just like Gil-soo, Min-ki's body started to crumble into pieces, starting from the injury he suffered. Slowly, the pieces broke down into dust particles, and just like the previous battle, the dust particles went near Min-ji, who won the fight by eliminating Min-ki. But Min-ji resisted and didn't accept the power surge after defeating Min-ki. With a messed-up dress, she held onto the needle she found in a toolbox. She knew the basic biology of humans, that if someone gets stabbed in the head, they will die. She was calm and perfectly waited for a moment, while Min-ki's completely distracted. Her classmates are shocked to see the tactic used by Min-ji to ensure her victory over Min-ki. Min-ji stood up and stepped out of the ring. In order to express her gratitude for saving her, Ki-rim thanked Min-ji for stepping in for her. But Min-ji was simply disappointed. Min-ji ignored her gratitude and brought Ki-rim to the reality they are facing right now, that she would die eventually if she wasn't strong enough. Ki-rim froze in fear after hearing Min-ji's words. Min-ji opened the door with ease, which was impossible for others to open. Before exiting the class, Min-ji explained to Ki-rim that she didn't intervene to save her and told Ki-rim to kill while she could, else she would suffer a meaningless death. But the door allowed only Min-ji to exit, and it closed as soon as she left, and didn't allow anyone else to exit. While the classmates are distracted by Min-ji, Min-ho enters the ring, talking about how loud these people are. He set his eyes towards Hyuk. He challenged Hyuk to get into the ring to fight him. With a blank expression, he tried to realize the situation he's in right now. Hyuk knew he was far more different than Lee Min-ki, as he showed no mercy for Gil-soo. Hyuk also knew that even Min-ji killed Min-ki without hesitation for survival. But Hyuk also realized he wasn't the only killer anymore. They all were killers. Hyuk smirked as if he felt like he didn't want to hold back anymore. It is similar to that of a beast that was born among the chicks. Every time the beast tried to touch a chick, it died easily. But the beast's mother said that the problem was not the chicks being weak, but it was the beast itself. Ever since, the beast lived low like a dog among the chicks, and ignored the chicks even when they pecked it. Min-ho was one of those guys who assumed he would kill the beast because it seemed weak, but the beast snapped. Hyuk stepped onto the ring. As he was climbing up the ring, he saw Min-ho and realized the last fight he had was an illusion. But Hyuk had no other choice but to confirm it himself. Hyuk started to tremble as he stood in front of Min-ho, realizing that the weaker of the two would die. Min-ho, on the other hand, was assuring Hyuk not to be afraid with a sinister smile on his face. He even told Hyuk that he was lucky that both of them belonged to the same weight class out of the whole class. Even Hyuk tried to laugh it off. But Hyuk let his beast out, consumed by wrath. Min-ho pitied Hyuk. He had to beat him to death. Comparatively, Hyuk is taller, but Min-ho was confident that he's a wimp. But considering Gil-soo, Min-ho became aware that Hyuk might become strong at any point in time once he receives his karma. Min-ho realized he received his karma as soon as he stepped on the ring, just like video game systems. But he also realized Hyuk hasn't received his karma yet. In order to take advantage of the situation, Min-ho quickly closed the distance between Min and Hyuk. Min-ho leaped with all of his strength for a takedown on Hyuk. Min-ho successfully grabbed Hyuk from his takedown attempt. As soon as he realized he caught Hyuk, he creepily smiled, thinking he had gotten his advantage over Hyuk. But in an instant, Min-ho was confused about what was happening as he saw tube lights in the ceiling, with blood in the air. Min-ho realized there was a lot of blood around him, and this must be a joke as he saw his classmates upside down. But his classmates were just horrified and scared after witnessing what had happened. Min-ho quickly lost his consciousness, and blood started to splatter all over his lower jaw and neck. It was Hyuk's devastating right knee to counter Min-ho's takedown, which ended up snapping his head due to his immense strength. While Min-ho's head fell down and his body started to leak a lot of blood, Hyuk was calm, but enraged by the beast itself. The beast that Hyuk had held back could no longer be stopped or controlled. Just like Min-ki and Gil-soo, Min-ho's head started to fade away. Meanwhile, his body also started to disintegrate into dust particles. And within a few seconds, Min-ho's entire body disappeared, and the shirt started to fade away as well. With a stale expression, Hyuk realized he had won the battle against Min-ho. His classmates were just awestruck due to his immense physical strength. Hyuk felt the blood of Min-ho on his pants near the knee, which he used to counter. Feeling empty, Hyuk just stared at it for a while. Hyuk was shocked as a message popped up in front of him. The ring gave Hyuk 10 points as a bonus, as he defeated his opponent before even karma was distributed to him, and it increased his karmic points. The message also showed his karma points distribution of Hyuk. Hyuk realized that he absorbed a part of Kang Min-ho's stats and understood that Min-ho had a lot of stamina due to his extra point over stamina. Suddenly, Hyuk felt something surging through his hand, entering his body. It was karma, and it was an unfamiliar feeling, but it also enhanced his muscles and tendons, which allowed him to move explosively. Hyuk clenched his fist and felt the power of karma coursing through it. Curious about this power surge, Hyuk wanted to try karma in order to understand it even further. But his mother's words crossed his mind once again. He quickly tried to erase the thought of killing anyone by nodding over, and he was done with killing. Hyuk quickly thought of a way to escape. Since he had defeated an opponent, he thought of walking away just like Minji. But his instinct suggested he fight more, and his focus shifted to someone else. His focus averted to Bae Hangsong. He always bullied other people. He found them a threat, as he might kill the weaker ones to survive. Hyuk was frustrated by that thought. Hansong started to pray and started to beg for mercy. Seeking forgiveness, he fell onto his knees and accepted that it was his fault for being a bully. Within that instant, Hyuk noticed something odd. He saw Hanseong's eye turn red while he was pleading, and within an instant, it reverted back into his normal eyes while he continued to apologize. Confused about what had happened moments ago, Hyuk noticed that there was something strange in his eyes. Hansong confessed that he regrets everything that he's ever done. But Hyuk wasn't buying his story, as he was suspicious of whether he would kill the weak ones, and Hansong was pleading that he wouldn't kill anyone and stay quiet. After hearing his plea for mercy, Hyuk was confused about whether he had to do something about Hansong. In the meantime, Hansong quickly drew a weapon out of his pocket. It was a cutter. Suddenly, Hyuk noticed a strange red flash over Hansong. Hansong, completely blinded by rage, charged towards Hyuk to kill him. He swung the cutter across Hyuk's face, but Hyuk nearly dodged the slice. Even though Hyuk almost dodged it, it still cut his face shallowly. Instantly, Hyuk countered it with a powerful strike to Hansong's jaw. The punch almost made Hansong go mid-air and lose his consciousness. The cutter fell onto the ground and broke. Hansong fell onto his knees again after being countered by Hyuk. But this time, even though he's on his knees, he totally went unconscious, and his face started to bleed due to Hyuk's precise and powerful counter. Hyuk tried to analyze why Hansong's eyes turned red, as if something possessed him when he was trying to kill him. The punch landed so hard on Hansong's face that he started to foam at the mouth due to its impact. But Hyuk realized he was just unconscious, not dead. Confused about the situation, Hyuk wondered if he had to kill Hanseong with his bare hands. But his attention was averted. He looked at his classmates and realized his classmates were still watching his gruesome act. He realized it was too late, and he's already a monster and a killer. Hyuk quickly opened his fists and approached Hansong's unconscious body. He started to choke Hansong by his neck, trying to strangle him. As Hyuk continued to strangle Hansong tried to resist. But eventually, Hansong gives up. Just like his friends, he also started to disintegrate into dust particles right when Hyuk was strangling him. Hyuk stood up and tried to dust his shirt off as it became dusty due to Hansong's disintegration. He even rubbed his hands off to remove all the dirt. Now that Hansong's eliminated, he thought it was over. As he stood before the karma point message in front of him after killing Hansong, Hyuk realized that this wasn't the end, and he wouldn't be happy fighting if it continued. But in that moment, Hyuk realized something. He turned around and took a glance at his classmates and his class. Hyuk was curious about the range of this supernatural phenomenon, whether it covered the whole school. But he was suspicious whether it would extend over the entire Gangdong or even the entire Seoul. Hyuk's curiosity quickly turned into a concern about his mom and whether she's all right or not. The hallway and the classroom were dimly lit. The windows were covered with blood as it became a fierce battle between men and women. Some of them, who were excited to see blood, used weapons like hammers to kill with incredible, while some didn't want to fight and had to fight for the course of their survival. This was a very similar rule to that of a ship anchor that sinks into the sea, to drag every person to the bottom by any brutal means. After a massacre, only some were alive from the whole class. Yoon Ki-rim, previously chosen by Lee Min-ki, was still scared after witnessing all the chaos that happened. Min Byung-sae was shy yet had many friends. And the teacher, who set his eyes on Byung-sae. Left with no option, the teacher chose Byung-sae for a duel in order to exit the room. Fear instilled by Byung-sae as he knew it was impossible for him to defeat his teacher. The teacher fought Byung-sae, and he quickly strangled Byung-sae, making him lose consciousness at a very quick rate. The teacher strangled Byung-sae to death, and his life slowly diminished. Witnessing all these horrors, Ki-rim was still traumatized and started to panic heavily as her life was at stake. The teacher glanced at Ki-rim in silence. As the teacher walked out of the classroom, Ki-rim asked him to save her while she was panicking. Consumed by fear, she started to think if it was all a dream and if she was stuck in class forever. Meanwhile, Hyuk was charging towards the window with immense force. But the barrier that was protecting the window repelled him, making him fall to the ground. Witnessing the barrier's force, he thought it was impossible for him to break it. Quickly, he stood up and ran across the corridor to find a way to escape his school. As he was running, the thought of his mom struck his mind again and again, making him unstable. He thought someone might be strangling her to death as of this moment. This thought alone made Hyuk lose his temper. He quickly kicked the nearby window again, but the barrier's force was so strong it didn't even budge for an inch. Hyuk delivered a powerful punch followed by a kick to break it. He landed a number of punches over it in order to break the barrier's force and break out of the window. But Hyuk used all of his stamina and fell to the ground, while a strange red message popped up over the window. Hyuk was surprised by the appearance of red text. The message implied Hyuk had to get angrier, and only then could he kill. Hyuk sighed deeply as the red message vanished. He started to wonder who created this game and what his intention was behind it. But he cleared all of his thoughts and realized one thing. Out of frustration, he quickly slammed the door beside him. He continued to walk along the corridor, and he realized that he would become a killing machine or a slave in order to survive until the end. Only then can he meet the creator of this game, at least once. And only that time he wanted to meet his faces and beat each and every one of them to death. The gym was the only place students could go once they left the classroom. There were a few people in the gym, but everyone had killed someone and had their guard up against each other as they maintained their distance. Hyuk entered the gym while Minji was sitting near the door. She took a glance at Hyuk and was surprised, but she kept her silence. While some started to enter the gym, another yellow message popped up displaying that a bonus game was on, and it was their break time to prepare for the future. Confused about this message, Hyuk analyzed that there are about 30 students in the gym with him as of this moment. But since it was written that the previous game hadn't been completed yet, he understood that more and more would enter the gym as time went on. A red-screened room over the balcony quickly caught Hyuk's attention. He entered the room as he realized that he needed to be a step up from the rest in order to win the bonus game. But it was just a locker room with a bunch of lockers and chairs. Hyuk quickly started to search if he could find anything useful. He even searched the dustbin nearby to see if he could find anything useful. Something else caught his attention. Being exhausted from searching all over the room, he saw something on the ground. Hyuk found a katana. He grabbed and unsheathed it to see if it was real and sharp enough to kill. The others saw Hyuk wield a weapon and were shocked. Within an instant, everyone scattered and ran around. Everyone started to search every corner of the gym in hopes of finding a weapon. Some of them even searched over the power supply box, and some tried to run away and hide. But Hyuk did not stop searching even after he found the katana, and eventually found another room that caught his interest. He saw another red curtain. Curious about what's behind it, he quickly slid it away and opened it. Hyuk froze after he saw that what was behind the curtain was a hidden rule. Hidden Rule 9 stated that if a person killed more than 5 people, they would awaken to an innate skill and become a king without subjects. But as he was reading it, the message started to wobble. Eventually, the message dissolved into the thin air. The message's dust was entering Hyuk's body as the message continued to disappear. Hyuk stood still, trying to figure out what it all meant while the curtains flew beside him. The gym was quiet from the outside. But inside, chaos erupted as people started to fight over the weapons they found scattered around the gym. While others even tried to take advantage of the situation when Mr. Lee and another teacher were fighting over a weapon. As people were searching for props all around the gym, another person entered the gym, confused about what was going on. He started to wonder what everyone was looking for. But most of all, he found a leg over his head. He saw Hyuk climbing the ceiling of the gym, hoping to find something useful for the bonus game, while he had already found another sword. He was surprised by Hyuk's acrobatic abilities and insane agility. He was fueled up after seeing Hyuk and realized he couldn't lose to him. He jumped explosively to the ceiling by using the balcony as a step. As the chaos continued, a golden light spawned in the middle of the stage. As the intensity of light reduced, it became clear that it was the yellow message again, indicating that the previous game and the break time had ended. Suddenly, the chaos stopped as everyone's focus shifted to reading the rules for this bonus game. Everyone had found a piece of armor and at least had one weapon with them, making them more prepared and dangerous for Hyuk in this bonus game. But Hyuk found only 3 weapons during the break time, with no armor. One of the swords was a Japanese sword for cutting. The other one was a bastard sword for both cutting and stabbing. And the other one was an S-stock for only stabbing, as all the equipment is of F tier. But Hyuk did find 5 hidden rules for the throne game. Hayuk found the hidden rule number 5, hidden rule number 6, hidden rule number 7, hidden rule number 9, and hidden rule number 15. As everyone was reading about the rules for the bonus game, he noticed that the current game was a bonus game and not a throne game. Hayuk used the hidden rules to realize that the throne game was a game where people would declare themselves as kings and collect subordinates to take the throne. He understood that rules numbers 9 and 15 were connected by the term king without subjects, and noticed it was a rule that needed another rule to understand, and was hidden in a hard-to-reach place. Since the reward would be a D-rank weapon, he knew it was better than an F-tier weapon and realized he must win that weapon. He aimed for rule number 9 and had no choice but to give up on rules number 5, 6, and 7. Hyuk resolved himself to show his worth to the creators in the game, and both the reward and the title King Without Subjects appeared to be decent. He only needed to kill 3 more people, as the conditions to become a king without subjects were to kill 5 people and awaken an innate skill, which he had already awakened. Eyes of distinction, which enable Hayek to see what intention a person has. The red and black flashes of light emitted from Hansung indicated his hostile, black, and killing red intent. In a moment where no one knew what the others were thinking, the eyes of distinction were an unrivaled skill. Suddenly, a golden light caught Hayek's attention. A big golden transparent cube spawned out of nowhere, startling the other students. Multiple cubes spawned over the entire gym, which startled everyone. The rules for the bonus game suggested that it was a golden opportunity to get an E-rank item. If a dropout, who would be indicated with an item mark, dies, and if a dropout kills someone, the mark would disappear, and they would be given karma points. But everyone was confused about what or who exactly these dropouts were. Suddenly, people appeared inside the cube. Surprised by this phenomenon, everyone swiftly averted their attention from the cubes. People couldn't understand what exactly happening now, but soon its meaning became clear. Everyone realized that the people who had appeared with an item mark above their heads were those who didn't fight until the end and were left in the classrooms. They were the only non-murderers here. Among them was Ki-rim, who was in Hayek's class, and it all meant that they had to kill the most innocent individuals to obtain items. People are divided into 2 sides. On the first side, there are people who gave up and didn't know what to do, and had decided not to act, even though they were the majority. As for the other side, it was further divided into groups, a side that decided that they had to kill to obtain an item, and a side that resolved not to let their friends die. While those who decided not to act spectated, the rest of them slowly started to surround the item boxes. Suddenly, someone swung a metal-spiked baseball bat over the box, trying to hurt the dropout. But he was curious as to why he couldn't hit. He understood the bonus game hadn't started yet. While the dropout was crying for her life, someone stood up for her. Teacher Kim came to defend the dropout, trying to defuse the students by morals. The students too realized it was Teacher Kim, but everyone was armed and dangerous. One of them yelled that everyone here was murderers and got to this place by at least killing one person. Consumed by guilt, Mr. Kim's reality sank in. He realized he even killed his students to get to this place, just for survival. Chaos erupted between the 2 factions. One of the students was trying to defend Hyejin by wielding an axe and defending both him and Hyejin. The opposite faction members just stood there, trying to find an opening as he was threatening to kill them if they came any closer. Minji glanced over the box and saw Ki-rim mouthing her name. Ki-rim was filled with hope that Minji would save her, just like she did from Min-ki. But Minji wanted her to get out with her own strength, as she hated the weak and loathed those who didn't resist. Because whenever Minji saw someone who was getting bullied or beaten in front of her, she imagined herself as if she were the one getting beaten up. She hated that pain, and she hated the weak who caused her to suffer. No matter how many times she stretched her hand to help, they didn't stand up for themselves and wished all the weaklings would die. Even though it was her honest feeling, she could never turn her back on someone who was suffering. She always hated that part of her, but there was nothing she could do to overcome this. Minji counted 6 people who surrounded Ki-rim and noticed that these people had a sword or wore chainmail. But Minji was better equipped with a shield, longsword, and body armor. But understanding she was outnumbered, she quickly scanned her surroundings to increase her winning odds, all amidst this confusion. But just then, the transparent golden walls started to fade away. Within a few moments, the only source of protection for the items vanished. Hayuk was determined to kill 3 people in order to achieve his goal. But out of all the people, he was confused as to whom he should choose. Choosing the weak people would be very efficient, but Hayuk refused. He decided to kill the first one who received an item and take it from them. Suddenly, a scream was heard throughout the gym. One of the students got impaled in the throat by a sharp spear, and blood started to splatter as he tried to push it away from his throat. He was pushed to the ground, and the man slowly pulled the spear out from his throat. When he pulled the spear out, blood started to erupt from his injury, as it was a deep one, and it cut the veins. Due to severe blood loss from the throat, he tried to breathe through the blood, resulting in severe coughs as blood started to ooze through his mouth as well. The man who stabbed stood there and watched as his victim struggled to breathe and was bleeding. But he sensed something behind him. A huge hammer, completely made out of light, just like the material that was used to hold the dropouts, spawned right behind him. The hammer swung across the face of the man with immense strength and speed, but it was targeting someone else. The hammer instantly smashed the dropout, killing him within a moment, with blood splattered everywhere. Everyone was shocked to see this scene and looked completely confused. And within a few seconds, the hammer started to fade away and disintegrate into smaller dust particles. As it faded, there was a pendant floating inside the hammer. The man noticed this pendant, and it now belonged to him, as he killed an item and earned it. He became aware and happy for a moment. He realized that he had an E-rank relic with him, which came in handy. Suddenly, there was a disturbance in the air. Hyuk quickly rushed towards him and quickly covered the distance between him and his opponent from the blind spot. Suddenly, he leaped into the air. While he was examining the pendant with his spear, Hyuk was in midair, focused on his first opponent, and prepared for his first hunt. He chose his Japanese katana, and as he got closer and closer towards his prey, he quickly unsheathed his katana for a powerful slash. He sliced through his head from the back, but Hyuk felt a clash when he sliced him, as if he was parried by something. His opponent became aware that Hyuk tried to slash his neck and behead him from behind, but Hyuk's katana broke into pieces. Hyuk couldn't even understand how and why his katana broke. The force was so intense that it didn't snap his katana into two or bend it. It was shattered into pieces due to some protection. His opponent turned around. Completely enraged by this, his eyes quickly turned red as he wanted to hurt Hyuk. Hyuk just landed on the ground with a broken katana in his hand. While Hyuk was thinking about what had just happened, his opponent charged towards him to impale him with his spear. He realized it could be some sort of protection spell that the pendant offered his opponent. He tried to impale and stab Hyuk in his gut, but Hyuk threw his broken katana as it couldn't be used anymore and quickly evaded the spear. The broken katana was high up in midair. Hyuk's quick reflex enabled him to punch his opponent's face in an efficient way. But as he punched through his face, he felt the same sensation again, as if something was protecting his opponent and parrying his punch. His katana was still in midair but started to descend. Hyuk was surprised to see his punch had no effect on his opponent. While the parry effect caused intense light energy, it made it hard for his opponent to see what was happening at that moment. He quickly charged towards Hyuk and tried stabbing him in his stomach, but Hyuk dodged awkwardly, making him inconsistent and making him lose balance. But he somehow converted and shifted the excess momentum while dodging, and this helped him to flip out of the situation, helping him to maintain some distance between him and his opponent. The broken katana finally fell down, with its blade part touching the ground first. But while he was trying to flip, his hand slipped, causing an injury in his hand. This distracted Hyuk as he was in the middle of an evasion. His opponent rushed in with immense speed by carrying his spearhead. But Hyuk launched himself into the air with the momentum he gained after pushing himself against the spearhead itself. The excess force Hyuk used to flip over the spear changed its direction downwards as Hyuk safely spaced himself. Hyuk landed on his feet and stood face to face with his opponent. Suddenly, he felt something, some sensation tingling over his body. It was a feeling that was way different from the boring fights he had against Minho and Han Sung, and a feeling that he hadn't felt for a long time. Hyuk's focus was on that glowing pendant, wondering how long it would last. He instantly moved out of the spearhead and tried to land another punch on his opponent. Hyuk was focused and fierce with his intentions and his punch. The punch landed on his opponent's face, but it didn't damage him at all as something parried his punch again, an invisible force. But the pendant stopped glowing after he landed that punch, and Hyuk instantly understood what was going on. He checkmated his opponent as he read the situation and quickly sidestepped. He quickly took advantage of his blind spot and unsheathed his estoc sword. Before even his opponent could realize what was going on, he noticed something was odd. He realized he had been stabbed in the neck from behind as blood started to ooze out of his wound. Hyuk held his estoc firmly as his opponent struggled to breathe. He quickly pulled his sword from his neck, which made him spill more blood than usual, and he even started to bleed from his mouth. His opponent slowly started to lose consciousness and felt his life fade away. He finally fell on the ground and passed away due to heavy blood loss. Just like the previous victims, he started to fade away and disintegrate into ash. While his body faded away, he noticed the pendant was still intact. Hyuk took the pendant. As he killed the first one, he realized he still had 2 more to go. He also obtained the pendant, a necklace of protection, and E-rank equipment that could intercept an attack within a certain range with only 3 interceptions at a time, and it recharged every 20 minutes. The total student population was 1,938 people throughout the college. But including teachers, the number exceeded 2,000, and out of them, only 812 had survived past the Ring of Rebirth. While only 150 of them participated in the bonus game, the dropouts were running throughout the gym for their lives. 2 of them surrounded and trapped a dropout while he was running for his life. Suddenly, one of them used a spear to tackle one of the dropouts, making him trip across the floor. He fell chin first on the floor. One of the participants held his head by the hair and pulled him back. He pulled up his knife and came closer to finish him off while he was scared for his life. The blade touched his neck. The same scenario happened throughout the gym. Many chased after individual targets, and the lucky ones who killed them would receive compensation. One of them drew his sword and stood in front of Kirim to finish her off while she was trembling out of fear. But within an instant, Kirim disappeared from his sight. Minji stepped into action and quickly leaped out of action with Kirim over her shoulders, escaping the situation with ease as they all stood confused. Minji grabbed Kirim and ran off towards the other end of the gym, where another fight was going on. She was heading towards Chu Young-jin, who was trying to protect his girlfriend with an axe while she hid behind him. While they were fighting with Young-jin, someone yelled his name, catching everyone off guard and surprised. It was Minji, carrying Kirim over her back. She jumped in to save him. She instantly kicked him out of the scene, and he fell onto the ground, dropping his sword. Minji landed on the floor as Young-jin was just shocked and confused. The moment she slammed her fist into the throat of a student who was approaching Lee Haijin, his girlfriend, an alliance was formed. But Minji had other plans apart from saving Young-jin and Haejin. She called Baek Sae-rom, who was also a friend of Haejin. Like that, she continued to call out specific people's names. But there were some who looked away because of their fear. However, there were also some who slowly entered the fray. As she started to aggressively form an alliance, the hunters felt overwhelmed facing Jong Min-ji's group. Even though this was a bonus game and even though an E-rank item was enticing, there were many individuals who didn't want to risk their lives for it. But some were still willing to kill even though they didn't have to put their lives on the line. While the chaos continued, some of them were struck with arrows from above and were caught unexpectedly, as none of them could block the arrows as if they were released by someone who was very skilled in archery. The third-year student representative, Pil Jung, along with his friend Sun Duk-pil, was willing to kill even though they didn't have to put their lives on the line by differentiating between people he knew and didn't know with a sword. On the other hand, one of the dropouts tried exiting the gym by running to the door. But as he was running, he noticed something behind. Fear instilled in him as if he were at the door of hell. He was beheaded within an instant by a player who ran around swiftly, cutting dropouts' necks. It was none other than the queen bee of third years, Lee Hyuna. She was cruel in her own ways, as she saved people with pretty faces and mercilessly killed those she deemed ugly. And she gave swords to those she saved and ordered them to kill others. On the other hand, there was a man standing over the dead body of a teacher, wielding an iron mace. 5 teachers died, and among them, 3 weren't dropouts, but those who hunted the dropouts. It was the gym teacher, Hwang Manggi, who didn't hesitate for a moment to kill his competitors. But there was also another human in the room, who instilled fear in his enemies, who were intimidated by his presence. Choi Jun-sung challenged his opponents if they wanted to move, as they were just trying to find an opening. One of them fell to the ground, and he walked up to them with a long sword in his hand. As Jun-sung was walking towards him, the other guy sneaked behind him. He took out his knife and was ready to stab Jun-sung from the back, as he was desperate for survival and to win the game. He found an opening. Within an instant, he rushed towards Jun-sung with immense rage and speed. He sensed something in that moment. The moment he tried to stab him, he entered a particular range. Jun-sung smiled as he already sensed his presence and was ready to counter it. With immense strength, Jun-sung swung his sword from below with a creepy grin, slicing him in 2 halves as he dropped his weapon. But even in this whole simple game, there were a few options, and players who shown each had their own style and techniques instead of a typical conventional fight. A sword clashed with a saber, creating sparks from this interaction between the tools. Since Hyuk's rule was more eye-catching, he was trying to kill the one who obtained an item. But instantly, Hyuk noticed something was wrong with the clash. His opponent's saber started to slice his sword, indicating the difference in sharpness between these two tools. Hyuk quickly stepped back and spaced himself in a safe position. Realizing that his opponent's saber was an E-rank weapon, which is far superior to his F-rank bastard sword, Hyuk understood that if his sword received a direct hit, it would mostly break into two. His opponent quickly swung across his gut to injure him, but Hyuk evades it with ease. He tried to assert dominance over Hyuk by continuously going offensive against him, but he was able to dodge it all and parry the strikes that he couldn't parry. Hyuk waited for the right time to counter his swing, and in that moment when his opponent tried to charge his swing, Hyuk quickly stabbed him over his chest. As it was a fatal injury, he instantly started to fade away into ashes. Just like he received his pendant, he received the E-rank saber, which was far superior. But Hyuk was confused. He noticed that there was something very different from his other swords. Hyuk's attention was averted to someone who was nearby. He saw a guy trying to fix his shoes. Suddenly, something caught his attention, and he was shocked. Hyuk rushed in quickly as he tried to test his new saber sword. He charged up his swing and was trying to slice him in half, but the shoes, which he just wore, provided a jump boost, which enabled him to exert more force for the jump. When Hyuk almost sliced him in half, he quickly jumped over his strike. Hyuk noticed his opponent was mid-air for an extended period of time. This caught him off guard as he wasn't prepared for that evasion and that ability. He lost his momentum and fell to the ground. He landed perfectly, and he was able to jump again like a spring. He used his boots to escape from Hyuk as he jumped around the gym and evaded everyone. Confused about the situation, Hyuk wondered if it was the effect of the shoes and if it would be challenging to kill him. Hyuk stood among the crowd, but within an instant he disappeared, making use of the crowd as his cover to cut his opponent's line of sight. Mid-air, he searched everywhere for a while and turned back to see where he was. He searched through the crowd but couldn't find Hyuk. He even looked over the other side to see if he could see Hyuk so that he could be aware of his predator. Since he couldn't see Hyuk anywhere, he thought he had stopped pursuing him and changed his target. Even though he felt a moment of relief knowing Hyuk isn't around anymore, he also realized it wasn't the right time to relax or feel relieved. But he noticed Hyuk in the middle of the public, covering himself, and he was rushing towards the landing spot of his opponent. He realized there was nothing he could do, while Hyuk trapped him mid-air, as it's impossible to dodge or evade mid-air. As he fell, he panicked that he might be killed, and he too knew that dodging mid-air is not possible at all. Hyuk's estoc pierced him and splattered his blood all over. Within that instant, his opponent died as Hyuk still stood firm on the ground. Everyone was filled with fear and shocked by the scene, especially the spectating students who thought they were a safe distance away but were terrified by Hyuk's determination to kill his target. Exhausted by chasing him, Hyuk gasped for breath to balance his breathing level. He sat on a chair, which was near him, to breathe for a moment and gain stamina. But as he was resting, he noticed something. People started to become cautious of Hyuk as he was actively killing people in order to achieve his goals. Although Pil Jung and Mangji had killed more people than Hyuk, he faced the most hostility. No one even doubted that Choi Jun-sung, the best fighter in the whole school, would kill people. But Hyuk popped off and did things that even the best fighter Choi Jun-sung wasn't doing around. This really caused trouble, and a lot of hate fell onto Choi Hyuk. But even when everyone was hostile and malicious toward him, he found a person with white hair through innate skill. In order to befriend Hyuk, he even waved at him. Hyuk was surprised to see him. He quickly ignored him, as he was feeling weird that he had no intention of hostility, even though he had killed people. As the round was about to conclude, the only dropouts who survived were the 4 Minji was protecting, as others either died or killed someone with the help of their friends and got rid of the item mark. Since it was tough to face the 15 people in Minji's group, the quest for the hunt ended right there. But within moments, the announcement for the next game appeared, which confused people and made them nervous about what was next. A red message popped up saying the throne game has begun. A golden light spawned in the middle of the stage. The rules for the throne game were displayed in yellow text, stating all the specifications for the contest as well. But based on the rules, it was possible for a lot of people to gain the support of 5 people in a single school. To think of it, a typical group of friends was made up of 3 to 5 people, and most of the time, it would be based on that one central person. And also, there were more people who attempted to gain 5 people's support than they thought. The reward suggested it was 10 karma points, and usually, if someone killed a person, a total sum of 7 karma points would be distributed to each stat, as it was better than killing someone mercilessly. But since the karma points could be allocated however we want, it might even be better than killing 4 or 5 people. Sun Dukpil received a golden message which popped right in front of him. The message asked if he wanted to support Pil Jung to make him a king for this round. He glanced over Pil Jung about this. Pil Jung nodded back, implying there's a sinister plan ahead, formulated by Pil Jung himself. Even Minji thought of 5 people, but she didn't think about those who trusted and followed her. She also didn't think about those who were easy to deal with, like Yoon Ki-rim. A yellow message popped up in front of people, asking if they wanted to support Minji. She thought of leaders she was familiar with and with whom she was friends, and spoke in front of everyone, asking if there would be endless thrones and suggesting unity among everyone for strength. People heard her speech, thinking about whether they want to offer their support to her. She was basically saying that the number of thrones was limited, and that the ones who declared themselves as kings had to fight each other in a battle royale. Since she asked right after the message appeared, people asked for Minji's assurance. But Minji was 50% sure rationally, but 100% sure emotionally. People realized the determination and confidence level of Minji. With trust, they all affirmed with Minji and chose to support her, as it would be beneficial to make her a king. A golden orb appeared out of nowhere in the gym. Minji's body started to glow as the golden energy started to spiral around her body. Golden shining lights appeared throughout the gym, indicating all the king's locations. Among the 797 survivors of the bonus game, 42 had become kings. The other set of rules was shown for the throne game, with the last one being hidden. It all fell in the right place for Hayek, as he had already killed 3 people. This was a perfect time to execute his plan for hidden rule number 9 and hidden rule number 15, and he realized he could have an advantage. Before the throne game could begin, there was a 5-minute time break to choose their kings. Otherwise, all those who hadn't chosen a king would cease to exist. Hyuk stood against the wall, resting up for a while and trying to conserve his energy for the game. Meanwhile, Young Jin was discussing with Minji about recruiting Hyuk to their team. Considering all the options and possibilities, Minji confronted Hyuk and asked him to join her team. Hyuk thought of all the good deeds and how Minji was with him the whole time for a moment. But since he had found the hidden rules, he had to stick to his plans in order to win the throne game. Hyuk told Minji that he had some circumstances that wouldn't allow him to join her faction. But after witnessing his immense power and agility, Minji didn't want to become enemies with him, at the very least. Out of curiosity, Minji asked which faction he was going to join, but Hyuk rubbed it off by telling her not to worry, as he wouldn't be her enemy as long as the situation allowed. Minji stayed silent, trying to process the situation. She immediately gave her hand for a handshake. Hyuk saw goodwill through the handshake. He sensed no hostility or malice in Minji's eyes, as she just wanted him on her team for an easier victory. Hyuk realized Minji didn't have any bad intentions. Hyuk shook hands with Minji, implying a peaceful relationship between the two. As Hyuk was standing, a black silhouette appeared in front of him, catching his attention. Choi Jun-sung introduced himself to Hyuk with a simple hi gesture. But Hyuk noticed something was off about Jun-sung. Hyuk quickly pushed him off by keeping a safer distance as Jun-sung thought Hyuk was being cranky with him. After witnessing Hyuk in action, Jun-sung realized Hyuk fights pretty well and wanted to fight together, as he thought it was mandatory to choose someone anyway. Hyuk refused it as he sensed something through his eyes. Jun-sung's eyes were red, which, by his innate ability, eyes of distinction, implies that Jun-sung has harmful and killing intentions. But Jun-sung smiled it off, as if he knew what was going on. He thought Hyuk was joining Minji's faction and was with her. He turned away and continued to walk away from Hyuk as he understood what was going on. But even in that moment, Hyuk noticed a red aura emitting from Jun-sung, but there was also goodwill equally. Confused about this, he thought about how it would be possible to have both goodwill and killing intent, and if it would mean he would destroy him, as he couldn't get him. Jun-sung continued to walk away as Hyuk continued to observe him, and knew he was a funny guy as he thought he could threaten him. Almost 5 minutes had passed. While everyone stood around the 42 kings, Choi Hyuk stood by himself and rejected everyone's offer when they tried to get him on their faction. Some even thought he was backed by someone powerful to act independently. When the timer hit 0, a golden light spawned and illuminated the room. It was the throne game's hidden rule number 9, which Hyuk found in a curtained room before the bonus game. Just like all those 42 kings, even the rule started to become dust and spiral around his body, as if he were absorbing it by himself. Although Choi Hyuk didn't know this, Unlike the other rules, which had multiple copies, there was only a single copy of the king without subjects rule, and everyone was just too stunned to speak. Even though Hyuk's ascension to king without subjects was an unexpected thing, everyone realized that the 30 extra karma points would make such a difference from the beginning that it would be harder and progressively get worse to catch up with Hyuk. The throne game's other set of rules was revealed, suggesting that there are only 5 thrones and they cannot leave unless only 5 kings remain. It also stated that the only way to end the qualification of a king is to kill them. The message indicated that the only way to end the qualification of a king is to kill them without hesitation. But most importantly, if a follower's king is killed, the follower would join the enemy king's group, as this would be an interesting rule because this way, it would expand their army exponentially. Now, after reading all these rules, those who had hastily become kings regretted it. It was as if they had volunteered to jump into a game of death with no options left. But just like we have 2 sides of a coin, there were other kings who had a burning desire to take one of the 5 seats. At the same time, killing intent poured onto Choi Hyuk, who was the strongest by himself but had no strength in numbers, as it would become beneficial and give him an extra hand if he had some. Choi Hyuk could see the killing intent with his eyes of distinction, as most of their eyes turned red. But Hyuk started to laugh menacingly. He unsheathed his sword, and as he pointed out, his saber sword started to shape itself into a jagged blade, resembling a fang. He pointed the fang saber towards Pil Jung, the master archer, then pointed it towards Jun Sung, the best martial artist throughout the school, then pointed towards the iron mace-wielding tank, Manji. And he continued to point his fang saber towards all kings, and with a creepy and eerie smile, Hyuk told them he was going to kill them all, while they were scared by his threat as it sent shivers down their spines. But he didn't mention or threaten Minji anywhere. Thus, she kept her silence and observed the situation. Since he received 40 free karma points, Hyuk distributed the points in stamina and recovery with 5 points each in power and speed, and 10 points for recovery with retribution as 8. But Hyuk himself didn't know how many he was going to kill throughout the entire journey. The plastin stats raised with items would be indicated such that if we were to take away the increase stat, it would decrease to that value subtracted by the number specified before, plus. Hyuk earned 3 items from the bonus game. An E-rank necklace of protection, which can intercept an opponent's attack within a certain range. E-rank tireless boots, which allow you to run faster and jump higher, and an E-rank fang saber with a durability of 300. Each of the kings had their own emblems, with Jong Min-ji as the Crazy Night King, Choi Jun-sung as the Slaughter King, Kim Pil-jung as the Hunter King, and Choi Hyuk as the King without subjects. There are 43 kings now, including the King without subjects, Choi Hyuk, and there were only 5 thrones. Each and every group started to distance itself from the others. Hyuk leaped over everyone within an instant, while everyone was trying to figure out his intentions. Pil Jung became alerted by Hyuk's actions, leaped towards Pil Jung, while Pil Jung instructed his shields to come forth and spearmen behind them, as it was effective enough to defend and counter as well, and he instructed the rest to get behind them and cover against the wall. Frustrated about the fact that he was targeted as soon as the round started, Pil Jung drew his bow and aimed towards Hyuk. Hyuk leaped in towards him, making it a face-off between the 2 kings themselves. However, instead of attacking Pil Jung, he landed beside him and ran ahead. Seeing this, Pil Jung was surprised. He looked back at Hyuk and realized that he was not trying to attack Pil Jung in the first place. His real target was the weakest of the 6 kings he pointed to, whose symbol happened to be a dole. Hyuk did not know his name, but only that he was friendly with Lee Minki, Hyun Sung, and the others who used to bully Hyuk. The targeted king raised his blade in fear. However, it was all for naught because Hyuk jumped over him while making a clean slice through his forehead. The targeted king was shocked in place, unable to move. It was only after a moment that he realized his bleeding forehead was a sign of his death. The system prompted him that he was the first to kill a king and was thus given an additional 3 free karma points, while his retribution points also increased by 3. As he landed on the ground after his first kill, the system also informed him that he got 2 points for killing a king in general. As the prompt disappeared, he realized he had taken 1 down and only 5 more targets were left. Originally, the subjects who had lost their king should normally get affiliated with the enemy king. However, Hyuk happened to be the king without subjects. The subjects who lost their kings and their affiliations were approached by other kings. These subjects ended up joining the first king who made contact with them. And so, whenever Hyuk killed a king, The place overflew with new subjects. This led to a chaotic state with all the kings hurrying to recruit more subjects. After all, when such a chance appeared in a game where you could die without enough power, the real competition between kings was bound to begin. The psychological battles quickly switched to a full-blown war. Heads were simply being slashed left and right in the devious brawl. Meanwhile, Hyuk leisurely slashed another guy's wrist off. With his wrist chopped off, he became a sitting duck for Hyuk to stab in the neck. Seeing the death of their comrade, others under the same king rushed towards Hyuk. However, he swiftly dodged an attack while simultaneously blocking an incoming swing of a blade. With a single slice of his blade, he killed both his attackers, beheading one brutally. Looking off into the distance, he saw the blood splattering everywhere as things had turned into a battle royale. The king whom Hyuk had been targeting yelled at him to stop. In a frightful tone, he screamed out a plea for the same. However, he had forgotten that his subjects could not disobey his orders, and by mistake, he had forced them to freeze in their tracks. This made it a very easy task for Hyuk to slip past their defenses as their king tried to run away. But to the king's horror, an enemy king's soldier attacked him from the front when he was not looking. A single stab was all it took for the king to stop in his tracks. The guy had started to grin, thinking he had come up victorious. However, Minji, who had been watching all this, swiftly slashed her blade from behind him. As blood spurted from his wound, Minji looked ahead with resolute eyes. Minji looked at her shivering friend and told her to kill the person Minji had just wounded. However, her friend was hesitating. Minji told her to shut up and just kill, calling her a piece of trash. With tears in her eyes, she resolved herself. Pushing the blade into the wounded guy's neck, she finally killed him. After a kill, the title of item that was floating above her head gradually disappeared. Minji was satisfied with this, but wished she could have done the same to Lee Hyejin as well. However, she cautiously decided to wait for now. Even the number of kings that survived, there was now more space than before, which made it easier to control their movements. Due to the brawl started because of Choi Hyuk, everyone's stamina was also at rock bottom. After using powers surpassing their stamina, the people were not able to move as they wanted because it was something similar to muscle pain. If Yoon Karim died in this situation, she was nothing more than an idiot. However, just then, something caught the corner of Minji's eyes. She looked back and horrifyingly noticed that Pil Jung's upper body had been cut off from his waist. Pil Jung had a shocked look on his face as if he did not understand what had just happened. And not just Pil Jung, but everyone was looking at his in shock. Pil Jung, the school president, had finally died, and it was Choi Hyuk who killed him. Minji was absolutely speechless, as she could not understand how Hyuk could have done that alone. At the same time, Choi Jun-sung looked ahead and regretted not surrounding and attacking another group earlier. As he looked at Hyuk, he fearfully asked if Hyuk really killed Pil Jung alone by himself. Hyuk gave him murderous eyes as he looked back. Through the crowd of Choi Jun-sung's subjects, he looked at him with bloodlust. With a deathly smile, he suddenly leaped forward with an attempt to slice Jun-sung's head off. However, Jun-sung was able to react in time and block the strike at the last moment. This did not prevent his hands from trembling as they received the impact. He realized that this was just Hyuk's pure strength, without any skill. Jun-sung had searched all over the gym and had found a skill he could use to hit with incredible speed regardless of what weapon it was. But Hyuk's simple knife was seemingly already on par with Jun-sung's skill. With another slash, Hyuk's sword clashed against Jun-sung's. Unable to block it fully, Jun-sung used his skill but was still pushed back as he rapidly lost stamina. If he used the skill even one more time, he would not even have enough energy left to run off. Realizing this, he ordered his subjects to all block Hyuk's path. While Hyuk tried to cut through Jun-sung's subjects, Jun-sung was running away with all his might. After getting rid of a lot of Jun-sung's followers, Hyuk decided to pause for a while as he took a sigh. He thought to himself how he had been so close to killing another king. It had been great when he killed Pil Jung when he was caught off guard. Pil Jung could not block his attack because he ignored the defense item on Hyuk. It would have been best if he would have been able to take Jun-sung along with him too. However, he had not really been fighting with the intent to kill. He had been training and experimenting how far his body could move and how he could stretch his arms and legs. In response to Choi Hyuk's ability and talent, the S-Talk blade evolved into a predator's sword, which was an E rank. Now, there were only 17 kings left alive, and out of his 6 specific targets, only 2 remained. Hyuk looked at his next target with a smile and said that they should continue. He took a deep breath and readied himself. With a swift push off the ground, he sprung himself forward. Seeing him still in the mood to fight, the others were shocked and wondered just how much stamina he had. The truth was that Hyuk's stamina was now sitting at a staggering 83 points. Hyuk's next target, Hwan Mangji, swung his mace as it crashed into the floor. However, Hyuk swiftly dodged the strike. He circled behind Hwang and made a slash that tore through Hwang's shirt. Both of them took a step back to steady themselves. However, Hyuk was smiling while Hwang shuddered in fear. Hwang immediately ordered his subjects to block Hyuk. Despite having frowns on their faces, they had practically no choice but to follow his orders. Hyuk looked at the incoming subjects with an axe. But without even blinking or batting an eyelid, Hyuk sliced the person's head in two. With a flurry of attacks, he swiftly did away with the rest of the enemies around him. While Hyuk was dealing with the subjects, their king Hwang was trying to kill others and get more and more points. He had decided that he had to end his game quickly if he wanted to live. With a swing of his mace, he struck 3 people at once and sent them flying. Clutching his weapon, he reminded himself that he had to be one of the last 5 kings. The moment Choi Hyuk had charged at Hwang Mangji, the other king's fates had been sealed. The battle dragged on as more blood was shed. Suddenly, in a part of the battlefield, a flurry of purplish strike could be seen. These were attacks of the assassin king, Lee Hyuna, who was fast and stealthy. However, her stamina was still a problem. When she grew tired, Jun-sung took his chance and swung his axe at her. It hurt her shoulder and dug into her flesh. As she fell down defenseless, Jun-sung made a charge. He stabbed his blade forward while giving out a fake apology to her. With a swift motion, he pulled his sword out as blood gushed out from her wound. She lay dead at his feet while Jun-sung was thinking that the axe was too good to throw away. However, even he knew that he would not be able to kill Hyuk with this, and he most definitely had to get a better item. Thinking so, he glanced towards Lee Hyejin, who was being protected by Chu Yongjin at the moment. These two had grown up together and had fallen in love with each other long back. For Chu Yongjin, Lee Hyejin was like his other half. Looking down at her frightened face, he asked her if she was okay. She tried to smile and replied in affirmative. But just as he hugged her, an axe came flying from behind her. Before Yongjin could even realize what had happened, he felt blood drenching his hand. Looking down, he realized that an axe was lodged into Hyejin's head, who was now dead due to the fatal blow. The system brought down the yellow hammer on her just like it had for every person labeled with an item title. Right in front of Yongjin's eyes, her body was crushed as her blood splattered everywhere. All that was left behind was a sword with a dark red design. Jun-sung made a dive for his last item and gleefully picked the sword up. However, at that very moment, Yongjin's eyes became bloodily red as he awakened the unique skill, Raging Warrior. With unbridled fury, Yongjin charged at the relaxed Jun-sung with axe in hand. Jun-sung underestimated him and simply kept his new sword raised to attack leisurely. Minji saw the reckless assault and tried to stop Yongjin. However, Yongjin was deafened by rage as he pulled his axe back for a heavy blow. But Jun-sung's slash did not penetrate deep enough as it was somehow slowed down by a mysterious golden shield at the last moment. Yongjin's axe met its mark as it left a splitting blow in the middle of Jun-sung's head. At the same time, Hyuk was successful in stabbing Hwang Mangji's neck. In a split moment, the lives of 2 kings had simultaneously come to an end. As they fell to the floor with blood dripping from their wounds, they both perished and disappeared. After all was done, Yongjin fell to the ground with teary eyes and grieved the death of his love while clutching the sword she left behind. Hyuk gave him a glance with sympathy. He looked around and wondered if this was the end. It had taken around 30 whole minutes to eliminate 26 out of the 43 kings. However, it barely took 5 minutes to eliminate 13 out of the remaining 17. Thus, only 4 kings remained. The Crazy Night King, Young Minji. The Heckler King, Kim Hunbaek. The Slave King, Song Seaman. The King Without Subjects, Choi Hyuk. The long, brutal fight had finally ended, and out of the 797 survivors, only 483 remained. The system notified that it was now time for the break, and the king and the subjects could freely move but could not leave the school until nightfall. At the canteen, a whiteboard had a list of the available dishes. Over there, the different kings and their subjects gathered to have their food. Hyunbaek worriedly questioned Minji why they were serving their meals together. He suggested an alternative of fairly dividing the goods and letting each group decide how to distribute it. After making the deal, he proceeded to call on everyone to have as much as they wanted since they were sharing the food between each other. While distributing it, Hyunbaek though to himself about how he had gained a political edge over Minji and decided she was just an idiot who did not know how to use power. An evil smile filled his face as trouble loomed over Minji and the others. It was not going to be an easy journey ahead for Hyuk. Anxiety spread around as the surviving students discussed how they had killed people. They wondered if it would be the same the next day too. While some students searched for their friends, wondering if they were alive, others sat on the ground shivering in fear, and some cried over their losses. Meanwhile, a student was sitting quietly in a class alone. He looked outside as something caught his attention. The barrier around the school seemed to be disappearing. His eyes widened in surprise. He hurried to his feet and shouted that the wall was gone. As soon as the other students heard the shout, they started rushing towards the school exit. However, there was a message that only the kings received which said that all troops were to stand by until the next morning. Hyuk felt a headache as he wondered just what the system was planning now. Minji tried to stand in the way and stop everyone. She told them that a message was sent to only the kings to stand by until the morning. She also mentioned that those who leave would perish. Hyuk was a bit confused that she had mentioned perish, but there was no such mention in the message. The others started chatting amongst themselves in confusion. Two girls questioned Minji and asked why only the kings received it, and questioned its legitimacy. Just then, Song Simin spoke up and said he got the message too. Hyunbaek came forward and said he got the message as well. However, he said that the message only said to stay in their positions till the morning. However, with shrewd eyes, he said that the thing about perishing was a lie. Minji narrowed her eyes as she was put in a tight spot. Everyone looks at each other confused, unsure whom to trust. They ask if there really wasn't anything about perishing. Young Minji affirms that it definitely said perish and asks Kim Hyunbaek why he is lying. Kim Hyunbaek is confused and asks why he would lie. Chu Youngjin says he got the message too and it said perish. People look at Kim Hyunbaek and doubt him. Kim Hyunbaek looks frustrated. Young Minji tells everyone to go back in the school. Kim Hyunbaek yells that it's easy to make someone a fool. Young Minji calls Choi Hyuk to gather all the kings she wants to discuss the kind of situation they are in. They gather at the classroom. Young Minji mentions that two things caught her attention. First being the words written in the Ring of Rebirth. She asks why it is not, "Will you live, but will you kill?" Today's message called them troops. Young Minji says whoever they are trying to make them into an army. The Ring of Rebirth is for individuals where they tested their talents for killing. They made them fight in groups and pick leaders in the throne game. She wonders what they would fight against as an army. Hyunbaek pulls out a bottle of alcohol from his backpack and takes a big sip. He is frustrated. Young Minji keeps calling him Kim Hyunbaek and not even friend or senior. Young Minji is angry and tells him not to piss people off in his drunken stupor since everyone is sensitive. She advises him to go out and stop the drinking and sleep. Kim Hyunbaek flips them off and leaves the room. The meeting ended with the agreement they would gather again once they had more information. Choi Hyuk looks at the table and sees his stats. He has a star next to the stamina, once he exceeded 100 points. It's not just an increase in statistics, but change in qualitative karma. He has received qualifications of a sovereign. He thinks about how this aligns with what Young Minji was saying, and maybe they are trying to form an army. He thinks the Predator's blade has no special abilities or karma, and it's just ugly. But it's good as a sword since it is sharp and sturdy. He suddenly remembers a woman's crying face as she's being choked to death. It's a nightmare and he tries to clear it, but he can't change the past and he's angry about it. Does this mean he needs to become a killer? Or does he become an indiscriminate killing machine after discarding his previous ones? He thinks that he should lay out some rules on who to kill and who to save. He first evaluates Young Minji. He calms down and decides to take things slowly. The bottle of alcohol drops and spills over the floor. Jung Minji runs through it. She is seen murdering the drunk people. Kim Hyunbaek is frightened and backed up against the blackboard of the classroom. He asks Jung Minji to spare him and tells her he's sorry. Young Minji draws her sword covered in blood as Kim Hyunbaek looks terrified and kills him. Next morning, Young Minji calls a meeting to tell that Kim Hyunbaek and the sex executives of the heckler troupe dies last night. She told them in their drunken state they molested a female student and committed devious acts. She goes to mention they ignored their restraining order and launched a preemptive strike, leading to the death of all 7 members. She tells the other members present in the meeting that she's sorry it could not be resolved peacefully. The other members look at each other in confusion and worry. One of them raises his hand and asks if it was necessary to kill them. She tells them that there was no other choice. A system message popped up saying the 24 people who didn't return in the morning had perished. Choi Hyuk thinks to himself that, as expected, Young Minji's guess was right. Another message popped up saying that all of Gangdong district had become a war zone. The next announcement said that on the 30th day, locations of escape codes will be announced and that only the troops with escape codes may escape. This was followed up by another announcement mentioning the location of places with living supplies will be announced. The ones who saw the message looked at each other confused about what's going on. Why did they mention survival? The wonder if they have to fight with other people for supplies. Choi Hyuk is shocked on hearing this absurd but harsh rule. Young Minji and Song Seaman allied together to go to D-Mart, a place with supplies. Choi Hyuk asked if he could go home first, which surprised Young Minji and Song Seaman. The city outside is in chaos and they do not know what it's like outside. Minji mentions it would be like suicide going through the city alone and asks Choi Hyuk if he's going to be fine by himself. A very determined Choi Hyuk says that he will be fine. Young Minji skeptically agrees. Choi Hyuk leaves the school. He looks outside the school to see a frightening view, wondering what the hell happened. Buildings are on fire, hospitals burning. In a single day, the city lay in ruins. Choi Hyuk reaches home. He comes to the kitchen and sees the dishes aren't done. This leads Choi Hyuk to wonder if his mom hasn't come back home yet. Choi Hyuk is nervous and scared for his mom. He goes to exit their apartment, wondering if this is despair or doom. He opens the door and sees nothing out of the blue. He goes outside, but then he gets chills. He looks around and feels something strange is going on there. People in the apartments nearby look at him downstairs by peeking through the curtains. A person waves his hands around and signals him to leave to warn him. Choi Hyuk, seeing this, looks confused. The man continues to signal and whispers to leave and that it's dangerous. Suddenly, something pops up behind Choi Hyuk. A gray monster with massive arms pops up out of the ground, tearing the asphalt roads around it. The onlooker who tried to get Choi Hyuk to leave is now sweating buckets. He yells at Choi Hyuk to run as the monster's eye emerges and stares at him. It's a quadruped with tiny horns and red eyes with gray skin. It drools as it looks at Choi Hyuk squared off against it. The nervous Choi Hyuk draws his weapon against it, determined to fight it. He dashes at the monster with his sword drawn back for momentum. The monster lifts its forelimb in the air and spreads its fingers into a claw shape, ready to smack down and attack Choi Hyuk. Choi Hyuk stops, changes his direction, dodges the claw attack, and retaliates by attacking the monster's hind limb. He manages to wound the monster, and purple blood starts spilling from the wound. Some of this blood falls on Choi Hyuk, whose uniform starts dissolving, and the ground where the blood spilt is also melting. He realizes that the blood is acidic, but fortunately for him, his endurance is high enough to where it doesn't melt his skin. The monster opens its jaw and lets out a loud screech, making an unnerving noise. This causes Choi Hyuk to be visibly disturbed and irritated. The monster uses this opportunity to throw a car at Choi Hyuk, who is now caught off guard. Choi Hyuk barely manages to dodge that, but then immediately the monster takes a plunge at him. Unable to dodge, Choi Hyuk ends up taking a hit and being knocked back. He ricochets off a car and crashes into a nearby building. The building wall is broken due to the impact of the throw from the monster. It continues to approach Choi Hyuk, who is currently laying on the ground. It lets out another screech. The glass panes from the windows on the buildings shatter and Choi Hyuk appears to be in pain. He draws his serrated blade and leaps at the monster, who lifts its forelimb ready to counter. Choi Hyuk manages to dodge and get under the monster. He lands a successful hit near the torso of the monster, causing it to cry out in pain and bleed once more. The monster is now enraged and fights back. It attacks with its forelimbs again and manages to hit Choi Hyuk's legs and making him unable to dodge the monster's attack. Choi Hyuk is on the ground with the asphalt under his feet turned to rubble. He looks up. The monster leaps at him with both claws ready to attack while Choi Hyuk is on the ground. The monster sinks both its paws into the ground where Choi Hyuk was. He's nowhere to be seen. The man who warned Choi Hyuk to run looks up from the balcony stunned. He recalls last night seeing weird messages but brushed it off as being tired. He wonders why his TV isn't turning on. He read a book and went to sleep. He regrets that because if he had left, then it wouldn't have been too late. He wakes up due to an earthquake. But this earthquake was caused by the rampaging monster that Choi Hyuk is currently fighting. Squishing humans under its claws, flipping cars, all he could do was watch from the balcony in fear. He sees Choi Hyuk evaded the attack and thinks there is still a survivor, and that he is incredibly strong. He wonders if Choi Hyuk is human or not, but that doesn't matter for now. What truly matters is whose side is he fighting for. He thinks to himself while watching Choi Hyuk fight the monster, that obviously Choi Hyuk is on their side. The onlooker is terrified, fearing for Choi Hyuk's life. The monster sinks its claws into the ground, smacking down on it. Choi Hyuk's blade emerges through its palm, slicing its arm apart, causing the monster to cry out in pain. Choi Hyuk looks determined and leaps in the air. He slices through the monster's neck in one slice, severing its head. The head crashes to the ground, making a huge thud. Choi Hyuk calls upon the onlooker, tells him to come down. The man still staring from his balcony is shocked to see Choi Hyuk survived. The monster's head lies on the ground lifeless. Choi Hyuk tells the onlooker it's dead. So do not worry, and tells him to come down. People gather in the parking lot alongside Choi Hyuk. They talk about a ring. The old man mentions he doesn't know anything about a ring, and some weird words appeared, but nothing happened. The onlooker mentioned that once it became night, monstered attacks like one Choi Hyuk just fought. The lady tells them that there was another that appeared for just a second that was the size of an apartment. She goes on to say she couldn't see it well because it was dark, but it was like a dinosaur. The other two argue they didn't see anything of the sort, but the lady swears she saw it. Choi Hyuk wonders if there is truly a monster the size of an apartment. He looks at the apartment and wonders how many slashes it would take to kill that monster if it were the size of an apartment. He tells the three residents of the apartment that he's going to Hinmyung Middle School. The old man tells him he's going to stay here since he doesn't want to be a burden to Choi Hyuk. The other two follow him to the middle school. They were imagining the middle school as a refugee shelter, but the truth is that place was a war zone. At the school, there were many things necessary, including food, weapons, and barrier of the weak. While the barrier was in effect, monsters who entered the school premises had their abilities cut in half, that of its original potency, if not for the barrier. With the states of people who just received karma, they wouldn't be able to avoid annihilation on the very first monster attack. Two of those same monsters that Choi Hyuk fought earlier approach the school main doors. The people are in a rush to get to safety and lock the doors. One of the monsters leaps at the school's windows and tears into the glass. This sight left the people taking shelter in the classes afraid and screaming. Men, women, and children were being attacked by the monsters, unable to do anything. The students who have armor and weapons rush to the front lines to fight. Until now, the monsters have never directly come to the front lines to attack them. Dong-soo Hyung in armor comes to the classroom just to see it covered in blood. Dong-soo Hyung and his allies call a meeting at night to discuss that they can't let the monster go beyond the barrier or they will kill them. There is only one method left, that being to stop them from retreating. He is seen outside the school gate waiting to ambush the two monsters lurking inside. Him and his allies hide behind a bush waiting for a good opportunity. They ambush and charge at the monsters, all of them at once, catching them in a surprise. The two monsters retaliate. Some of them get caught in the jaws of the monsters. Dong-soo Hyung leaps at one of the monsters, directly yelling, "Stop," saying he won't let them pass. He manages to thrust his sword into the top of the head of one of the monsters. Suddenly, his ally calls out to him and tells him to watch out. He turns his head to see the other monster was ready to bite him, jaws open, charging at him while his sword was still in the head of the other one. He is terrified and thinks if this is how he dies while looking directly into the monster's mouth as it charges at him. He closes his eyes, accepting his fate. Suddenly, the monster's head gets split apart. Dong-soo Hyung is surprised to see this and relieved. He is surprised to see Choi Hyuk cutting off the monster's head in one slice, rescuing him. Dong-soo Hyung is on the ground. Choi Hyuk standing in front of him. They stare at each other. Dong-soo Hyung looks surprised to see Choi Hyuk. He asks him who he is, but Choi Hyuk continues to walk. Choi Hyuk is thinking that if his stamina is similar to his power and speed, he can only go all out for 5 minutes, which means his stamina consumption is similar to before. But Hoi Jun-sung would pant after a single strike of his lightning strike attack. Choi Hyuk wonders why that was. If he used his control stat to completely control his body even for just one strike, could he bring enough strength to make his body unable to use karma for a short time? Choi Hyuk attacks another monster, slitting its mouth apart. At this point, there were a total of 37 monsters left in the school premises, but the formation of Dong-soo Hyung's suicide squad was on the brink of breaking apart. The members looked scared as they were facing two monsters, even wielding a shield and swords. Choi Hyuk leapt from behind them forward towards the monsters. He thrust his sword into the skull of the monster and continued to follow through on the slice, splitting it in half and killing it. Meanwhile, another student wielding a crowbar is under attack by another monster. He tries to use the crowbar to prevent the monster from closing its mouth. Choi Hyuk is seen killing the monsters in the way. The ferocious monsters were shocked as they looked over to see their leader split in two. After killing 3 with a single slash and wounding 4, Choi Hyuk was already at the rear of the monsters. He had charged in facing them and ended up at the rear. There was only one monster in front of Choi Hyuk. Choi Hyuk let out his breath and swung his arm. The monster curled up more pitifully. But Choi Hyuk's blade didn't touch the monster. Instead, he used the power behind it to swing his body around. Choi Hyuk's foot stomped on the crook monster's forehead and jumped up. Instead of slicing the frightened crook monster, he decided to use it as a stepping stone and crushed it after kicking off. The monsters decided to start retreating to escape. The students who had surrounded them defeated them one after another. The crook monsters who used charging tactics against the humans were, in reverse, defeated by charging tactics. Choi Hyuk notices he isn't recovering fast enough. He realizes the penalty for using power that exceeds the power and speed stat isn't only a decline in stamina, but recovery of stamina as well. Dong Soo-hyung thanks Choi Hyuk for guarding the fortress and saving their lives and grants him an item order request. When they use the scrolls on dead monsters, a golden hammer would appear smashing the corpse and leaving an item behind. They used a considerable number of the item scrolls in Shinmyeong Middle School to change all 46 monsters into items. The sight of golden hammers falling from everywhere was magnificent. Kang Dong-soo offered Choi Hyuk to choose 8 items of the 46. To come to this offer, Kang Dong-soo and the 7 leader figures of the Shinmyeong stronghold after discussing about it. Since they used their item scrolls, they should take a fee and reduce it to 5, but then another argues they can't be stingy after such a dangerous situation and suggests going big and offer 10. Another person counters it's fine to give him the 8 he killed. However, Choi Hyuk didn't feel like being greedy. He didn't even need to. 8 E-rank items were enough. If he took any more, he wouldn't be able to use them all and just become baggage. Choi Hyuk first picked an armor. A set of armor made from the crook monsters. The moment he encountered a crook monster, he regretted not taking armor from the school. Besides that, he chose the E-rank flash sword that was like the estoc he used in the past. He then chose 3 recovery potions and a handy bag that could store more things. Choi Hyuk's mood became better after placing the potion chest filled with 6 potions in his handy bag. He was worried by the fact that today's fight put a strain on his body, but with these potions he would be able to fight even harder. Kang Dong-soo seemed to be sad at the loss of the potions as he looked at Choi Hyuk's handy bag. However, he quickly changed his expression and energetically asked if he planned to stay there. Kang Dong-soo was surprised. The outside with the weakening barrier would definitely be more hellish than here. He couldn't understand why a young student would go out alone in a place like that. Choi Hyuk thought this isn't a game where you can survive by locking yourself up, survive, and escape. That's the key. For each of his stats past 100, he had a star next to the stat. He wondered if there will be another star past another 100. Instead of changing quantity, there was a change in the quality after upgrading past 100. He lies in a sleeping bag still wondering what happens if he invests more karma points in the stats increased by the items. Flashbacks to a red-haired person sitting on the floor asking a person to repeat what they said looking angry. He is smoking on the ground while angry at a person for swearing at him and proceeds to beat him up and kill him. 2 people bystanders asked if he just killed someone who were promptly threatened by the teen. He asked them what that has to do with them using vulgar language, giving no respect to them. The old people were furious. They took him by the collar and beat him up. When he retaliated, more people came up to support him and beat the kid up. He apologized, face all bleeding and crying. He said it wasn't him while someone stomped on his face. Teachers and parents got involved trying to stop the men who were engulfed in madness. Innumerable students were ripped apart. Afterwards, whenever students saw a man, they would lower their gaze. Irrational violence firmly carved itself into reality. Fear and taboos were created. Each group had similar situations to this. Sometimes at selfish people who didn't participate in the battle against monsters, sometimes at the director of the daycare who left the children and escaped by himself, sometimes at foreign laborers. The people realized that in this place, loners meant death. And even if it was rubbish, authority was needed, as only when they stood up for the chosen authority could they ensure their safety. Fear and taboo created order. Quickly, ranks were being assigned. Also, depending on who and how they gained power, greatly influenced the characteristic of the group. It was like the age of civil wars. People who gathered in the assembly areas were busy establishing order. Young Minji's troop, those who started with a battle royale instead of an assembly area, were trying their best to secure their first supplies and base. Dong Soo-hyung tells Choi Hyuk that Shimyoung Middle School wasn't the only assembly area. There were others like Dongjin Hospital, Hyunhar Department Store. There were also people who said those were assembly areas. Dong Soo-hyung tells Choi Hyuk he thinks he saw the monster's lair. Choi Hyuk asks where the lair was, to which Dong Soo-hyung replies that it was where the ecological park was located. Dong Soo-hyung goes on to mention there is a dark hole-like thing there which appeared in mid-air. He mentions some monsters came out of it. Not crooks, but these had 2 legs and sharp arms. They were something else, human-shaped. Choi Hyuk arrived at the ecological park. An intense battle was already going on. A young guy held a sword and shield and was fighting monsters by himself. Though his movements were sloppy, he was strangely fighting well. As if he knew where the monsters would attack, the young man was steadily slaying monsters even as he stumbled. He slays the monsters pretty effectively, chopping of their heads. When the giant blades the monsters had struck down, the young man would do whatever it took to deflect it with his shield. As their blades were huge, a large opening would follow the monsters' attacks. The young man would use those opportunities to stretch out his sword and stab them. Choi Hyuk remarked that he's strangely good at fighting and the man's abilities were incredible. The young man was completely exhausted and suddenly yelled for help. Choi Hyuk was quite surprised that moment. Choi Hyuk didn't reveal his presence and stood behind the young man. However, the young man had sensed Choi Hyuk's presence without looking back. At the young man's request, Choi Hyuk unsheathed his blade and charged forward. Choi Hyuk rushed in a step quicker than the bladed monster's blades, when he instantly killed 5. The bladed monster, who was sitting at the back, stood up face to face with Choi Hyuk. It had 2 legs and 4 blades instead of hands, and screamed unpleasantly and charged at Choi Hyuk with its arms spread. Choi Hyuk reflexively dodged the first slash. He couldn't even see the blade. Choi Hyuk was barely able to avoid the second and the third as well. Its physical abilities made it seem like it would easily slice up 10 crooks. Its power and speed were much greater than Choi Hyuk's. Its continuous attack with 4 blades was like a saw with no opening. Choi Hyuk tried his best to dodge and was on the defensive. The bladed monster's attack hit Choi Hyuk's arm, causing him to get knocked back so far that he crashed into a wooden bridge. The monster didn't allow any room to breathe and kept going on the offensive, relentlessly attacking Choi Hyuk. Choi Hyuk ran from the monster's attacks. His foot slipped on a rock and he tripped and fell down on the ground. Unable to get up in time, he looks back to see the monster charging at him still. He remarks that it's fun and puts out a grin. Steam expelled from the monster as it attacked more ferociously. Choi Hyuk became more absorbed into the fight and was able to see its moves and narrowly avoided or blocked them. The monster had increased its pace. However, after it let out all its steam, its vigor died down. On the other hand, Choi Hyuk had already read his opponent's attack pattern. The exhausted bladed ghost kept wielding its 4 blades. That moment, its first and second blades struck down, and when it was about to raise its third, due to exhaustion, its speed had slowed down a little. Choi Hyuk's eyes flashed. He squeezed out the karma in his body and slashed out with his fang saber with the shortest distance and quickest speed. Choi Hyuk instantly added all his strength into his slash. The fang saber ripped apart the bladed ghost's neck and 2 of its arms. A system message popped up saying he has exceeded 100 retribution. First to succeed in upgrading your retribution, he received another qualification to be a sovereign. He was allowed to have 5 subjects, whose karma will increase by 20% if they followed him. He finally upgraded his retribution. Choi Hyuk poured his remaining free karma points into stamina. This time, his free points were applied without penalty. The Predator's blade absorbed the blood of a worthy opponent. The Predator's blade quickly absorbed the bladed ghost's blood, and the mummified bladed ghost turned to dust. The dust passed through the portal it was protecting and scattered. The young man, who was there first, pointed at the portal and told Choi Hyuk he had to destroy that. Choi Hyuk didn't reply as he examined the portal. Choi Hyuk wielded his Predator's blade and split the altar. With a vibration, the portal turned into smoke and disappeared. A system message popped up. First, to destroy a target. Granted 2 additional free karma points and an additional rule revealed that every night the number of monsters that cross over the portal increased by 20%. While Choi Hyuk was still processing the meaning of the 20% increase, the young man screamed. It seemed like he saw the same thing. The young man started to mumble something. He calculated that by the 30th day over 1 million monsters will have crossed over. Choi Hyuk thought as he looked at the despairing man that he was fast at calculating. Then he turned around. But the young man, who was despairing by himself, called out to Choi Hyuk, saying he knew Hyuk would come. He told him Choi Hyuk had to go with him. He was Baek Seoin with the intuition skill. Baek Seoin was at the Veterans Hospital when it happened. He was drinking a can of soda at the rooftop. The sudden assembly announcement caused crowds of people to gather in the hospital parking lot. There were even some who wanted to enter the hospital by passing through the security guards. There were even people who were speaking nonsense, something about seeing monsters. Just when he had taken a sip of his drink, Baek Seoin suddenly had an ominous feeling. Cold sweat ran down his back and his heart raced. It was as if he heard a scream coming from within him. He felt like he would suffocate. Baek Seoin was in a panic as he hurriedly left the hospital. His heart was pounding and his vision narrowed. He heard a scream, someone yelling to help them. An air conditioner unit fell on the floor due to the shaking of the ground. Just then, he heard the sound of loud screams and shouts and saw people running in fear from something that was following them. A monster the size of an apartment that spewed flames from its eyes and mouth suddenly appeared as if it had dropped down from the sky. The Tyrannosaurus-like monster kicked the building right next to the one Baek Seoin was hiding in. The monster blew flames, and those flames spread out in a circle, completely burning people in its path. The advancing monster swung its tail and bashed its head on the hospital and meticulously buried the people under the wreckage. Behind it was a swarm of monsters that hunted and killed the escapees. People were chased and hunted by these smaller dinosaur-shaped monsters. Unable to do anything, he stifled his cries and could only let tears drop from his eyes. The monster that smashed the hospital suddenly disappeared. Just then, Baek Seoin received another message. The Wyvern of Destruction will appear again on the final day. The Wyvern of Destruction will protect the escape code. He tells Choi Hyuk his intuition only cared about his safety. It didn't matter whoever else died as long as he was alive. Choi Hyuk listens to him deep in thought as he mentions that they need to form a suicide squad that will destroy the monster spawning portals ahead of time and kill the Wyvern of Destruction. He tells Choi Hyuk that he needs his help to do that. That moment, Choi Hyuk was deep in thought. The Wyvern of Destruction. How can he kill it? Was it possible to kill an apartment-sized monster with a sword? Perhaps it was not meant to be a monster to kill. Maybe they were supposed to lure it away and escape. Choi Hyuk resolved himself to kill the monster. It was fine if he looked for the method starting now. He asks Baek Seoin to lead him to the portal to test if his intuition was right. Baek Seoin revealed a slightly hopeless expression. His intuition tells him that the monsters over there are going to be stronger than the ones here. He asks if it would be better to look for more people before then. However, Choi Hyuk just shrugged his shoulders. He said to think of it as a test. If he wanted to stay with him, it would be a bit troublesome if he would die facing monsters at that level. Baek Seoin looked as if he had no other choice. Choi Hyuk shares his potions with Baek Seoin, who drinks them to get his karma back. They were at a mountain fighting mountain orcs. Baek Seoin had almost died. Choi Hyuk decided to ask him to know more about intuition. He began by asking if his ability is only sensitive to his well-being. How does he know the locations of portals? He told him it was because he resolved to kill the Wyvern of Destruction. From that moment on, he started to fight with intuition, ignoring his heart that wanted to find and trust a safe group. After a day of looking for information and ignoring his intuition, a new intuition formed. It's probably telling Baek Seoin a way to survive even after fighting the Wyvern of Destruction. He felt that if he found a portal and fought, someone would come. And someone did come. That was Choi Hyuk. That's when he realized that the only chance to survive the Wyvern of Destruction will be him. Choi Hyuk liked Baek Seoin. He especially liked the crazy thought of needing to kill the Wyvern of Destruction. He asks him why he wants to kill the Wyvern of Destruction. He mentions he's always been an unfilial son. He is planning to be unfilial one last time and killing the lizard-like wyvern monster. Choi Hyuk was able to understand him better than anyone else. He liked his thirst for revenge. He was reminded of the brutality that had happened in his school. The moment Choi Hyuk decided, a message appeared in front of Baek Seoin saying that Choi Hyuk wanted to accept him as his follower. Once he accepted, all his karma points would increase by 20%. Baek Seoin looked at Choi Hyuk with surprised eyes. He examined Choi Hyuk's face, bit his lips once and nodded his head. Choi Hyuk asked him why he said they needed a suicide squad, to which Baek Seoin replied, "The number of monsters will grow tomorrow, and it will be even more difficult for the two of them to clear portals." Choi Hyuk lifted his nearly recovered body. Since it was obvious that if it was going to be harder tomorrow, it was best to destroy more today, and decided to fight. Lee Jin-hee resolved herself not to fall asleep. She held a knife and waited for nightfall in her bed. The monsters who were targeting this place? The Shadow Teeth. Their whole body was surrounded by a black fog. They possessed great stealth abilities, so people didn't notice when they passed by right in front of their eyes. The only time they would show their appearance was when they slashed the neck of a sleeping person and drank their blood. Every night, 3 shadow teeth would enter, and each one would take 1 life and disappear. 3 at a time, 1 person each. That was the gist of it. People who saw the shadow teeth tried to go after it and kill it, but it was faster than them and killed them and escaped. They surrounded the shadow teeth and struck its face. It started turning to dust at its mouth. The shadow teeth cried out a strange sound to call its comrades, and its comrades who were waiting outside would enter and save the shadow teeth. That day, there were 21 deaths and 7 injured. The people in the hospital were divided on whether to fight or not. Where they fought, the shadow teeth let out a screech that called forth its comrades. Where they didn't fight, there still was people who died. Day 3 had 3 deaths as well. No one saw or heard anything. Lee Jin-hee grit her teeth. She didn't know how, but somehow everyone knew in just 3 nights. The fact that 3 shadow teeth would enter and that each one would kill 1 person. People would look the other way even if the person next to them was dying. Because the moment they took notice of it, the chance that the shadow teeth would go into a frenzy and kill them as well was high. A hoarse cry for help was barely able to escape from the victim's ripped throat. She could hear him struggle with his suppressed body. A shadow teeth had passed by Lee Jin-hee without her noticing and had gotten on top of a victim and slashed his throat. Lee Jin-hee got up abruptly, and she saw it. A person who was lying next to the victim waving his hand, telling her to sit back down. She held her blade in her hands and shouted out loud to wake the surrounding people. The shadow teeth looked at Lee Jin-hee and screamed. The people who were still lying down tried not to pay any attention to the commotion. The shadow teeth grabbed her blade and stopped it, trying to dodge her attacks. She pulled her leg back, preparing to counter. She kicked the shadow teeth and sent it flying with a bang. The shadow teeth was cunning. As Lee Jin-hee's attacks were tough to deal with, it jumped up and attempted to escape while piercing the necks of the escaping people on its way. However, Lee Jin-hee was quite formidable. Her awakened karma added to her energy as she leaped on the monster. Lee Jin-hee, with a powerful swing of her blade, completely cleaved the monster in 2 halves from its torso. Soon after, criticism poured down on her. The man who was lying down next to the victim shouted. He asked her what the hell she was doing. They all ignored the fact that she slayed the shadow teeth and turned on her because she was the reason 3 people got injured. She argued if they were going to let people die. But the man asked if she saved him, to which she couldn't reply as the victim lay lifeless on the floor. The first victim, who had his throat ripped by the shadow teeth, had already died from shock. She asks, so if they gave someone else away as food, they are supposed to shut up and let it happen. He called her a greenhorn and asked her who she is to be so self-centered. She talked about some portal yesterday doing parkour. If she wanted to die, he told her to die by herself, not to harm others in the process. The man let out all the animosity he accumulated. He felt disgusted by the young woman who kept going outside raising her voice. He couldn't forgive her useless sense of justice that almost led to his death. And Lee Jin-hee argues back that if they stayed stuck there like cowards, they will die. She goes on to state currently, only 1 person dies a time. But what if that won't be the case in the future? He asks her if she thinks everyone here stays still because they have no courage. If she sees because of her high and mighty justice that others are dying, that's not justice but simply her having no sense whatsoever. Lee Jin-hee felt like her energy was escaping her. If you looked at it mathematically, it was true. If everyone stayed still, only 1 person would die, while if they fought, many would die. She became agitated. Although she looked towards the other for some support, the others were simply timid and turned away from her gaze. As soon as she looked around, people who came to be on friendly terms with the man over the past few days all spoke against her. She decided to leave the place, let them all suffer, no point in arguing. She suppressed her boiling anger in her chest. You couldn't kill someone just because you were angry. She was experienced in parkour since her first year in middle school, an exercise where one could deftly move rapidly through urban environments, clearing obstacles with various athletic movements. She was currently using the power of karma to exceed her limits. She was able to steadily pass through as there were no rough movements in her run. She stopped and sighed. As her head cooled, she became embarrassed. She was happy she left after losing her temper, but she had no plans. She had no choice but to keep walking. It was too late to go back now, so she thought she would look for another assembly area at the next station. She suddenly heard noises and smelled the distinctive stink of monster blood. At the same time, in the darkness, sounds of fighting and shouting approached her. It was an earnest cry for help meant for someone else. Lee Jin-hee hesitantly peeked around the corner. That moment, as if he had heard her thoughts, she heard the voice shouting at her to help. Lee Jin-hee instinctively ran towards the sounds. She would come to see it was the sound of Baek Seoin calling out to Choi Hyuk while fighting a bunch of monsters. Choi Hyuk and Baek Seoin were fighting scaled monsters that looked like they had armor. Baek Seonim calls out for help while he guards with a shield and a sword. Choi Hyuk is readily slaying monsters alongside Baek Seonim in a subway. Baek Seonim remarks that these monsters are different. Usually each portal was protected by a single type of monster, but this one had different kinds of monsters ranging from tank types to spider types and much more. And the monsters were being commanded by a mid-boss using military-class strategy. Baek Seonim calls out to Choi Hyuk and asks him to say something. Just then, suddenly Choi Hyuk crashes into a wall due to the impact from a monster's attack. Baek Seonim instinctively calls out to Lee Jin-hee, who is hiding behind a wall trying to understand the situation that is going on. When Baek Seonim finally shouts desperately asking her to help specifically, she decides to go and see what's going on. She sees Choi Hyuk and Baek Seonim fighting, fending off the monsters with Hyuk in the lead. She leaps forwards into the crowd of monsters in order to lend her help. With a swing down, she stabs one of the monsters in the head. She looks forward in awe as she watched Choi Hyuk. He has leapt up in the air and is now slaughtering the mid-boss, which looks like a bat with 4 eyes. As his blade penetrates the monster's skull, he follows through in a swift motion to slice its head, splitting it apart in half. The two of them quickly slaughter the rest of the monsters. Suddenly, a monster head hits the wall behind Lee Jin-hee after getting thrown by Hyuk as she watches with her jaws dropped. An additional rule is revealed, stating after 15 days monsters become organized. Choi Hyuk has destroyed more than 5 portals and revealed more than 2 additional rules. This grant him a C-rank skill, Soaring Slash. Lee Minji is awestruck and calls Choi Hyuk as Appa. She tells him that the way he jumped and killed the monsters were art that she's never seen anything like before. Choi Hyuk is confused as to why she called him Appa. She goes on to say that any person who is good at parkour deserves to be her Appa. She begs him to teach her. Baek Seonim and Choi Hyuk tell her they plan to kill the Wyvern of Destruction, a monster the size of an apartment. Upon hearing this, she is initially shocked they would dare challenge a creature the size of an apartment. But even when there was no karma, they were climbing walls of buildings with their bare hands, and now that they have karma, anything is possible. Choi Hyuk and Baek Seonim look at each other equally confused and concerned. At Duncheon High School, Young Minji and Lee Jin-hee were sitting down across from each other. Chu Young-jin was silently standing behind Young Minji. She asks if the rumor about the enormous monster wasn't just a rumor. Lee Jin-hee goes on to mention there are 2 conditions to win. One is destroying all the portals and suppressing the monsters. And the second is to either kill the Wyvern of Destruction when it appears on the final day, or at least keep it busy. If they fail to do either of the 2, it is impossible to obtain the escape code. Young Minji had almost decided. She asked her last question to confirm if the king without subjects sent her and asked her to prove it. A black flag fluttered above Lee Jin-hee's head. It was Choi Hyuk's symbol. Upon seeing this, Young Minji decides to accept her offer and smiles in relief. Young Minji declared that from now on, their troops will try their best to destroy portals, and they would be dispatching their elite troops in a week. Lee Jin-hee mentioned there was an assembly point in Hyunhae department store and mentioned they had the most power, and quite a few troops had already gathered there. Young Minji said it wasn't far, which was good. The 2 finally shook hands after coming to a decision and agreement. During the first week, they cleared out 12 portals. But as each day progressed, the fight became more and more difficult since there were exponentially more monsters pouring in every single day. The LED to the growth of the number of monsters they hadn't killed, they had to put a stop to this. Choi Hyuk decided to put together a suicide squad and dispatch the very agile Lee Jin-hee as a messenger. Lee Jin-hee left Duncheon High School with light steps. Young Minji stared at the Lee Jin-hee, who easily jumped over buildings. Her movements didn't waste any energy. Lee Jin-hee disappeared from her sight in an instant. A speed even monsters wouldn't be able to follow. Young Minji asked Young Jin Sr. to call the kings. 4 kings gathered. Currently, at Duncheon High School there were 3 people who had the title of a king besides her. The slave king Song Simon, the student king Min Kyung-chul, the pig king Ma Dongshik. Ma Dongshik was the man Lee Jin-hee previously fought with. She announced her plans on dispatching troops to destroy portals and forming a suicide squad to support Choi Hyuk. Min Kyung-chul asked her how many troops she was thinking of deploying. She replied that plans to deploy as many to destroy as many portals as they can. Young Minji already decided to cooperate. Even if there were losses on her side, it was to reduce the number of casualties overall. This kind of decision was made because of her personality. If the door to hell opened on the final day and countless people were slaughtered by monsters and the wyvern of destruction, she had no doubt that she wouldn't be able to endure her sensitivity to others' pain. The Pig King. Ma Dongshik wanted to oppose her. He suggested instead of doing it, they act like doing it since they're not the only ones who will be fighting anyway. Young Minji tells him, they are not the only ones. What if everyone had the same thought Ma Dongshik did then? If that's the case, everyone might die? The coward Pig King asked her why that someone had to be them if they want to take the lead everyone should. While he talked, Ma Dongshik read at Jung Minji's mood. Jung Minji was younger than Lee Jin-hee, who fiercely talked back at him a few days ago. His insides squirmed at the fact he had to treat her with respect. However, she wasn't someone he could handle. Ma Dongshik argued they couldn't fight the portal monsters or the wyvern of destruction. They already suffered enough losses. They were people with a family to protect and couldn't take that risk. Young Minji, enraged, drew her sword. She threatened Ma Dongshik that if they didn't want to fight the monsters, would they prefer to instead fight with Minji's troops? She mentions she did not call them all for a meeting. With her words, the atmosphere grew cold. She had gathered the kings not to discuss these matters but to announce it. At least it was different from her original demeanor of listening to their opinions after their groups merged. Ma Dongshik froze momentarily before finally opening his mouth. He said he understood but asked her to reconsider the number of dispatched people. He reasoned they had families they wanted to reunite with and couldn't have them all go into mourning suddenly. He asked one person from each family be dispatched. But Lee Minji denied, saying that there were students who couldn't find their families too, and they won't treat those with families any differently. With strong karma, even the elderly can run around. Ma Dongshik's face distorted at her words. Young Minji went on to continue that if they are weak, they die. This is that kind of game. Ma Dongshik wanted to let out his anger and slam the table, but he desperately endured it. He was barely able to suppress his anger and force a smile, saying finally that he understood. The scene shifts to Baek Seoin and Hyuk as they are rummaging through a box to find supplies. 3 gangsters come up and ask just who they are to be crawling here like that. Baek Seoin notices them as Hyuk looks to the side too. He sees them and suggests they should split evenly since they are both there now. The gangsters look at the extended hand speechlessly. The middle one finally gives an evil smile and glares at them. Soon a bunch of gangsters come up to them and surround them. Baek Seoin is surprised as he looks around at the assembly. He tells Hyuk that they seem to be in a dangerous situation, but his intuition did not seem to be activating. Hyuk lets out a chuckle as he smiles. The gangsters had an axe symbol on their head, as was natural for them. He was debating in his head about which of those 20 gathered gangsters to keep alive and get information from. Just then someone yells from behind the gangsters to stop. A person in an army outfit wearing glasses comes up and tells the gangsters punks to put their hands away. The said person has 3 other people standing behind him wearing similar outfits. One of the gangsters looks at them and murmurs that it is the Association of Comrade in Arms. The army man suddenly claps his hands. He looks at Hyuk and Seoin and tells them that they should think of themselves as lucky civilians. The army man then looks at the gangsters and says that they knew that their assembly area was nearby the area. However, since they came from a long way, he wanted to split it evenly between them. The gangster cursed out as he heard that and started shedding cold sweat. He reached into his pocket in a hurry. Out came a handgun as he fired a shot into the ceiling. Looking at the army men intimidatingly, he told them that it had nothing to do with them. He then pointed the gun at them and told them to go their way. The army man looked at the gun silently. With a wide grin, he revealed a missing tooth. Suddenly, the others who were with him started bringing out various weapons. The army man motioned to his ears and mocked them, saying that he could not hear the gangsters cause he was too old. Meanwhile, his comrades were now standing beside him with numerous guns scaring the gangsters. The gangster leader was shocked and could not utter a word. The army man now said that they will be splitting the items 2-to-1 and they will be taking the larger part. Just then, he looked at Hayek and told him that as civilians, they both should quickly run away. Hyuk heard this and chuckled mockingly. While the two group leaders stared in surprise, Hayek started laughing maniacally. With a single step, he disappeared from his spot. The others were shocked as they couldn't even see when he moved. Without even a warning, Hayek appeared in front of one of the gangsters. With a single punch, he blew the gangster's head off. The blood splattered and hit the person beside the lifeless body. With another quick blow, Hayek hit this person and broke his back. Just then, a gangster came up with a gun. He pointed it at Hayek's head. However, Hayek sharply noticed the exact moment when the gangster was about to pull the trigger. With a swift movement of his hand, he disarmed the person, leaving him screaming in pain. The other gangsters were shocked but quickly got to work, shouting at each other to shoot Hyuk. With one punch after another, their heads blew open and splattered across the floor. The blood painted the walls red as they all fell one by one. Meanwhile, the army men observed speechlessly as they noticed the literal massacre. The old army man leading the bunch even started sweating as he thought to himself just who this kid was. Baek Seoin panted as he took something out from under his shirt. He looked at the necklace that Hayek had given him. If not for the necklace of protection, he would have died in the blink of an eye from all the bullets. Meanwhile, Hyuk quietly stood between the bloody mess he had created. He looked back at an unwounded gangster who was now backed up against the wall in fear. The gangster was utterly horrified as he pleaded Hayek to stop. Hyuk grabbed him by the neck and lifted him up. While the gangster struggled to get words out, Hayek asked where their headquarters were. The gangster stammered out a response that it was at the KTT building and pleaded with Hayek to spare him. Hyuk asked if he did not think of the consequences when he came at him shooting guns. The gangster kept shouting for help, but Hayek mercilessly snapped his neck and left him on the floor. The supply boxes were now all open and in plain sight. Hyuk talked with the army man and told them they should split it evenly. While one of the soldiers were about to complain, the older leader stopped them and immediately agreed to Hayek's demand. He said that Hyuk was quite an amazing young fellow and was exactly like the army man had heard. Meanwhile, Seoin was looking at the dead bodies lying on the floor and noticed one of them had a speed enchant. He said it was quite a waste for it to end up in the hands of a gangster. Enchants were unique items presented in a jewel-like shape that got etched on the skin when used. Enchants were very valuable and were limited to stat-increasing items. They were an additional way to increase one's stats, and one could overlap up to 5 enchants of the same grade as retribution points. Choi Hyuk currently had a combination of 3 control enchants and 1 stamina enchant. He additionally had the Ring of Speed and the Ring of Vigor with him too. Seoin left the body alone as he realized there was not anything left to use this time as well. Suddenly, he looked towards the army men looking through the boxes of supplies. They seemed to be happily analyzing and calculating their rewards for the day. Senonin walked up to Hayek and called his name. He asked him if he was planning to go wipe out the gangsters at the moment. If so, he told him that they should take those army grandpas as spectators. Upon hearing Hyuk's confusion, Seoin explained that they needed to start showcasing their power. He explained that people would only fight the Wyvern of Destruction if they saw that there is a chance if they fight with Hayek. Hearing Seoin's intent to promote their team, Hayek gave it some thought. He then asked Seoin if those armed men would even want to watch them fight. Seoin told him that they should give some gifts to incentivize them. He walked up to the army men, calling them grandpas. Saying that they were going to clear up the gangsters, he asked them if they would like to watch. The army men looked at each other in confusion. The leader looked at Seoin and asked just why they should do that. He said that they might not have got the news yet, but they had already requested an alliance with their leader. Thus, Seoin was hoping that they could watch their skills and discuss it with their leader later. The army men said that they had already seen that their skills were amazing, however, Seoin dismissed that as nothing. He showed them an item card and said that they would not leave them empty-handed as a show of friendship. The army men discussed it among themselves and decided to go. Seoin smiled upon hearing their agreement. Seeing Hyuk already walking out, the army men asked in surprise if they were going right away. Seoin said that that was indeed the case. The army man was a bit surprised and wondered if they were really going like that. The two of them alone against a whole building of gangsters seemed simply absurd. Thinking thus, he convinced himself that Hayek must be having forces elsewhere. However, when they all arrived at the enemy base, the army man could not help but ask where their comrades were. Seoin just told them to not worry and simply spectate from a distance. Looking back, he once again told them to not go anywhere. The army men were now a bit concerned. They started thinking that they were young ones who did not even value their own lives. However, they were confused too because those two simply did not look like such kids. Seoin came running and called out to Hyuk. He asked if they were not going to sneak in, since Hyuk seemed to be entering from the front door. Hearing Hyuk's confusion on why they should do that, Seoin said that it will be hard to distinguish between friend and foe if they fight head-on. Seoin told him that it was simply not good to kill people who were forced to cooperate with the gangsters. However, Hyuk told him that cooperators were not any different from the gangsters either. While this shocked Seoin, Hyuk turned around. He said that he does not kill people who are not cooperators. Seoin fell into deep thought on hearing that. If they used that method, the civilians would not know what is going on and would oppose Choi Hyuk. He was conflicted within himself upon whether this was right or wrong. Back during Japan's invasion, in order to survive, there had been people who cooperated with the Japanese Empire with no fault of their own. Seoin wondered whether they could be called innocent by his definition. How far could excuses like wanting to live be used in such situations? Just then, Hyuk called out to Seoin. He told him that he should not start misunderstanding things. What they were here to do was not kindness. They were doing it because they needed to, and it just so happens to be a group who picked a fight. Baek Seoin was much softer than Choi Hyuk. Hyuk had inwardly engraved the word revenge into his heart. He believed that those who lowered their heads because they were scared of the gangsters would simply not be of much help even when fighting the Wyvern. In such a situation where supplies were insufficient, it was impractical to unite everyone, and it was better to reduce the number of people where it was possible. As Hyuk neared the gangsters, they took notice of him and Seoin. One of them lazily asked why the two of them were there. Hyuk simply stared at him and said that they were there to hunt gangsters. The gangster's face was flushed with anger as he uttered a curse. Hyuk immediately punched his face and blew it off cleanly. Seeing the beheaded gangster, the two other people behind him tried to run. However, one of them was too slow and got his head severed. The other one, in a green tracksuit, rang a whistle that alerted the entire base about the intruders. The gangsters all stopped what they were doing and turned their attention to the source of that whistle. Meanwhile, Hyuk had pointed his sword at a kneeling person who asked if they were there to hunt gangsters, because if so, he wished to join them. Thus, the three of them entered the KTT building area where around 1,300 people had assembled. Among them, 500 were gangsters while 800 were normal people. Although gangsters had many problems with the law and morals, as they were experienced fighters, they were quite courageous even when fighting monsters. Thanks to them, this place was the safest of all even against the monsters. But this big place was in no way free for the normal people. Gangsters excluded normal people. They monopolized information and items that were only advantageous to them. Not too many days had passed when the gangsters became the king of this place. And after that, they had revealed their true nature. Hyuk was simply angry at how things were going over here. He shouted out and said that since the gangsters here had attempted to kill him, he had just come for payback. Looking at the surprised people, he told them that if they were not a part of this, then they should just leave. The gangsters and people alike looked at Hyuk, wondering just who he was. The person who was standing behind Hyuk fearfully thought that it was a shame that it was only two people who came. He shook his head and said that he could not really do anything about this and he preferred fighting those gangsters than getting killed by these people. Looking down at Hyuk, the gangsters starting talking, calling him a crazy guy. Hyuk sensed their bloodlust with his eyes. He simply gave off a smile at the thick smell of blood in the air. Unsheathing his sword faster than anyone could react, he dashed forward. Heads rolled left and right wherever Hyuk passed through. The other gangsters simply looked at this horrifying sight and shivered. They started running away in fear. However, it was already too late as Hyuk was at their position and cleaved through them neatly without any issues. One of them, who had run a bit farther, tried to plead with Hyuk and asked him for help. However, Hyuk ignored his request and sliced through his torso with a clean cut. He looked back and though that this guy had been quiet when Hyuk looked weak, but he had immediately changed his attitude and started begging for his life when Hyuk turned out to be strong. Just then, someone creeped up behind Hyuk with a gun in hand. However, just when he put it against Hyuk's head, Hyuk heard it clearly. The man was utterly surprised as he could not believe what he was seeing. Before he had even noticed, someone had come up behind him and impaled his back. This person slashed through while shouting curses at the gangster. He looked at Hayek briefly in silence. Hyuk did not say anything and walked past the person. The person had a bit of hostility towards Hayek, but it was not excessive. He knew how to fight, but he was not an enemy, and so Hayek had decided to spare him. However, right in front of Hayek, all of a sudden, another person stabbed a gangster in the back. With the knife in hand, this guy also looked at Hayek silently. However, Hyuk glared at him with cold eyes. The person was petrified and shocked as he asked what kind of criteria it was that Hayek followed if he even killed those who killed gangsters. At this point, Hyuk had slashed through the person's neck and was walking ahead already. The person who was now falling to the ground was wondering why it had been him. Hyuk simply stared at the building filled with malicious bloodlust. Soon the clean walls were splattered with blood and damage. Hyuk's face was not an exception either. Bodies lay strewn across the floor as Hayek approached the final room. He opened the door slowly. The moment Hyuk stepped foot inside, he was greeted with a bunch of people holding blades against his neck. The leader of the gangsters sat at the back with bulging muscles and a domineering presence. He cursed Hayek as his body shivered in rage. Looking up, he asked Hayek why he was still alive till this point. Hyuk simply looked at his sword and noticed its durability was quite low. He tossed it away without much care. The blade landed on the floor and shattered to pieces on contact. The leader of the gangsters looked at this and told he had better give up. However, before he could say any more, Hayek had already dashed across the room and delivered a swift kick to the leader's head, smashing it against the wall. The others were shocked at how fast this had happened. As they shouted in worry for their leader, the leader himself was lying down with his bloody head smashed against the wall. Hyuk's face darkened as he looked down at the boss's lifeless body. He looked up coldly and exclaimed that the leader was pathetic. At the KTT mall, the fight had finally died down. Seoin grabbed a bag of items and called the army men over. He handed the bag to them saying that this was a gift for them. While the army man said okay with a straight face, behind his glasses he was actually sweating hard. This event had reminded him of that time when he had seen a one-sided battle, a massacre. He thought he had seen it all. But what he saw at the KTT mall was simply way too brutal. It was on a whole other level. After the battle had ended and the loot had been collected, the army men greeted Hayek and Seoin and said goodbye. Before they left, Seoin stopped them for a bit. He requested them to kindly discuss the events they had seen clearly with their leader when they returned. The army men turned back with sweaty faces as they said they'll make sure it is done. On the 10th day, Hayek and Seoin were killing monsters as usual. The number of monsters Hayek was killing every day was absurd, but still not enough to reverse the flow. If Hyuk tried his best, he was able to hunt around 400 monsters a day. On the 10th day, 20,000 monsters poured in from the 30 portals. However, that was not all, as the amount of supplies would be reducing by a third every 10 days. Instantly, supplies that were originally able to feed 500,000 people could only sustain about 170,000. But there were still 300,000 people alive on the 10th day. During this time, due to the amount of supplies, although they did not starve to death, the temptation and tension was intensified. The key reason for their temptation happened to be the portals. Destroying the portals was necessary, but at the same time, it was risky too. Because of this, the number of deaths and victims continued to increase in groups allied with Choi Hyuk, and those assembly areas which only sought after supplies were becoming more secure. While some fought for others, there were those who wanted a free pass which forced Minji to raise her sword. Thus, she dispatched an envoy to a neighboring assembly area. The envoy arrived at the headquarters of the said assembly areas and told them Minji's kondaiton. The assembly area was to spearhead the fight to destroy a portal the next day. Otherwise, they will have to give up their right to the supplies they owned. Hearing this, the face of the assembly area's leader darkened. He let out a mocking laugh. The leader mockingly said that this person sent by the crazy Night King must be crazy himself. The envoy did not react harshly and simply looked forward with silence. Thereafter, he returned to the base to report to Minji. Another envoy who had just returned asked Minji if they should kill them all. Minji coldly replied that they should kill all except for those who are less than 14 years old. The subordinate was confused and asked how they should determine their age. Minji was silent for a while before she started her sentence. She hesitantly replied to let them live if they looked young. However, the subordinate once again asked if they should kill their parents as well. Minji was firm in her reply as she instructed them to mercilessly kill their parents. Although Minji empathized with the weak, she was not confident in being able to kill those who surrendered, so she left Chu Young-jin in command. Even when she had hardened her heart, she was unable to bear the death of children. Despite being respected, This ambiguous attitude of hers naturally brought sarcasm. Still, her decisive actions displayed a surprising amount of power. To set an example, the heads of the assembly leaders who defied her were cut and skewered on blades to be displayed in front of the burning building. The neighboring assembly areas, who were shocked at her merciless slaughter, decided to take part in fighting monsters. With Choi Hyuk's massacre and Minji's power play, the Allied forces were able to take advantage of this fear to win over the other forces more easily. Not long after this, everyone had started to destroy the portals. By day 15, the number of portals was reduced to 20, but more than 30,000 monsters appeared in a single day. And the number of monsters continues growing. There were now 250,000 survivors and around 130,000 monsters. It was already an established fact that at some point the number of monsters would easily exceed the number of people. Choi Hyuk looked at the C-rank skill called Soaring Slash. He was unable to use it as he needed at least one stat and retribution points to reach rank C. As his stats and retribution points passed 200, they evolved into 2 stars, and his stats no longer increased when killing normal 1-star monsters. Even when he killed mid-bosses whom he called 2-star monsters, his stats did not increase automatically. To achieve 1 star, 100 points were needed. For 2 starts, around 200 points, so 300 points would be needed for 3 stars. It would be impossible to use Soaring Slash at this rate, but then he would not have a blade made of karma, which means he would not have an area attack. It is practically impossible to get a stat, and his retribution points to 300 by the 30th day, so his last resort was enhancing his control. Up until now, it was best to increase his stats harmoniously, but now things had changed because a new rule stated that the number of monsters that arrived through the portal would increase by 20%. It did not matter if he had more power and speed, he would simply not be able to go against all the monsters. He needed an overwhelming breakthrough. If a person saw it as a game, then the tutorial had just finished and now it was time to choose a class. The more he increased his control stat, the more easily Hyuk could manipulate karma. At present, he was not only able to control his power and speed, but he was also able to control his karma. Hyuk lets out a deep breath as he pulls his fist back. His fist hits a truck and sends it flying while breaking it in 2 pieces. He pushed upwards with his palm. It ended up sending a blast of air that completely tore off the wall of a building in the far distance. Seeing the destruction, he paused for a bit. Suddenly, he felt a crack as the bone in his hand broke. That explosive punch had surpassed his endurance, and thus his arm was unable to take the load. His control was at 148 points, so he decided to concentrate and give it a try. He held his blade up high as he steadied himself. With a shout, he tried to use Soaring Slash. The karma in his body started flowing towards his arm and gathered at his palm. It then proceeded to flow into his sword. For a second there, Hyuk was able to see the pathways and the direction in which the karma moved, so he expected some positive results. With a deep breath, he pointed the sword ahead. His foot, firmly planted on the ground, left a huge crack on the tiling as the pressure coming from him increased. Bits of rock started floating around him. Closing his eyes, he forced himself to focus, as he felt a pull at the sword's handle and decided it was time. With a heavy lift of the sword, he forced all the karma into it. As the sword glowed blue in color, Hyuk was almost blinded by its shine. However, after a blink, he clearly saw it. It was only for a split second, but a blue blade had formed from the karma that filled the sword up. The exhaustion from using the karma is extremely taxing and causes him to fall to his knees. He pants from exhaustion as he looks ahead. However, there is now a smile on his face as he realizes that he can finally make it. He can finally make a blade out of karma without the assistance of a skill. There were 7 groups that were allied with Choi Hyuk. Young Minji's troops, the Alliance of Comrades in Arms, the Knights of the Korean National Sport University, Shinmyung Stronghold, Kangul River Park Stronghold, Seonsa Hyundai Park Stronghold, Cheonhu Hyunhai Department Store Stronghold. All allied forces assembled at the Hyunhai Department Store. They had initially discussed the formation of a suicide squad, but a new rule made it so they had to unite together. The new rule was that the monsters would start to act in groups, so they had to unite. Further, supplies were going to reduce significantly every 10 days, so it would be in their administrative interest to get together. However, if the barrier of the weak collapsed, there would be no way to fight against the horde of monsters. Because of this, the more groups there were, the faster the consumption of these barriers of the weak. So all the forces, a total of 130,000 people, started to gather towards Hyunhae Store. The reason they chose the Hyunhae Store was because there was actually a healer there. Back when all this began, The hospital was going through its normal routines. However, the system told them that those in the hospital would be unable to leave unless they killed 3 patients. At first, everyone was surprised at the nonsense they heard the doctors saying since the patients could not see the message. However, in the end, the incident unfolded in a similar way to the Ring of Rebirth. After they confirmed that they really could not leave, chaos erupted. And the scarier part was that there was no way to know what the hell was going on outside the hospital. Finally, on day 4, the meals and rations inside the hospital were almost exhausted. As the doctors looked at the sleeping patients, they raised their knives with a guilty heart. In a single night, they lost all the dignity they had kept up the past few days and attacked the weak patients. The stronger, healthier patients were not much different. Finally, someone died. Someone was explicitly murdered. Seeing this, the chief doctor was utterly infuriated. He said that the others did not have the qualifications to call themselves doctors, as he swung a baseball bat to keep them away from the patients. The others tried to reason with the chief doctor, but he would not hear any of it. Keeping his guard up, he backed into the room where the patients were present. Once inside, he bolted it shut to make sure that the other doctors would not be able to enter. He even pushed an empty bed against the door to give it support. Seeing this, the patients were extremely alarmed. However, the chief doctor turned around with kind eyes. He told them all not to worry and assured that they would be safe. On day 5, he came out of the room. He saw one of his fellow doctors sitting outside in the hallway with a guilty face, but ignored them as he pushed a medical cart that he needed. On the 7th day, even the intravenous saline fluid was running out. Just then, a system notification showed up in front of him saying it was calculating his retribution points. It said that he was now a healer type since he had not killed any patients and continued to look after them. The doctor was shocked on seeing such a message in front of him. However, at that moment, the patients who were lying down started disintegrating into light particles. The golden particles filled the room as the chief doctor screamed in sadness at the deaths of the patients one after another. Every time a light was absorbed into his body, his retribution points and karma increased, especially his control and recovery stats. However, the chief doctor, named Judgement, was not happy at all, because in his eyes, he only saw the figures of the patients who had disappeared. Tears streamed down his eyes as he realized that they all ended up dying in the end. With a mortifying shout, he fell to the floor on his knees as this marked the birth of the only healer in the Gangdong district. Atop the Hyunhae store, Judgement stood at the roof with his hands stretched outwards. He opened his eyes with a firm flare and shouted at everyone to get up. His shout was imbued with power as it echoed down and reached every soldier looking up at him. His hands held a blob of holy light that sprayed particles of light down. These particles of light landed on the soldiers and invigorated and buffed them. All of them started to sing in unison as Jinman continued to bless them. The skill called Get Up was a support skill that would increase one's courage and awareness along with their sense of camaraderie. All these people experiencing the same scene at the same time felt a sense of security and kinship with one another. To these people who continuously lived in a cruel environment, the comfort from this skill was greater than expected. After casting the skill, Jinmin retracted his hands and the glow faded. As he backed down, the leader of the Hyunhae store assembly came forward to give a motivational speech for the army. He said that they only had 13 days left. There were currently 19 portals left and around 40,000 monsters coming through them every night. However, he asked them if their strength only amounted to so little, and if this was the strength of them humans who rose to the top without fangs and hides. He demanded them to show the monsters just how strong they were. It was time to show the unknown creators of the game their worth and their strength. With this, he assigned instructions once again saying that shielders will be blocking the front. The spearmen will be stabbing. The swordsmen will be ending it all. Ranged attackers will stay behind the lines and will follow the commander's orders. Meanwhile, the detachment will support the crumbling front lines. With all troops in place, he finally shouted that it was time to go. With a finally war cry, the entire army readied itself as it awaited the monster horde. A large shadow loomed over the frontline shield bearers as they looked up. A bull rammed through their defense with utter speed, throwing away anything in its path. And right behind it, jumped up the nightmarish creatures with swords attached to their hands. The commander told everyone not to be afraid. He told them to advance, but the creatures were way too fast for them to be able to do much. The battle was off to an extremely messy and chaotic start already. However, the humans were not entirely helpless as one of the soldiers shouted at his fellow brethren to endure. He pointed at the suicide squad and told the others not to fall behind. If they fell behind, then the suicide squad would surely die. A soldier killed multiple enemies by throwing spears like a javelin. Meanwhile, the fencer poked and thrusted their rapiers at the enemies at insane speeds. At another corner of the battlefield, a bald-headed man in heavy armor grabbed the enemy's head and threw them against each other. The battle was going well, but the silhouette of the dark creatures lurked eerily in the shadows.